Marvel's master of multiversal magic. Hello again, dear adventurers of the multiverse. Thanks for joining us once more on this epic journey. Remember, this story is pure science fiction from our wild imagination, so don't go trying to summon dragons in your backyard. The rights of this amazing novel belong entirely to its original author. We are only the narrators. Do you want more adventures? Show some love to our YouTube channel with a subscription and a like, and if you want exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting for you with open arms. Chapter 276 The beginning of Fairy Tale Civil War. Night fell on a high hill outside Magnolia City. Laxus, the Thunder Dragon Slayer mage clad in a black coat, gazed at the Fairy Tale Guild, now a landmark, a smug grin spreading across his face. The Thunder God clan is finally back. This moment has finally arrived. The fairies will fight amongst themselves. And you, old man, your era is over. Now, I will lead the guild to the strongest, Thunder God clan. Reporting for duty, 2 men and a woman emerged from the darkness, standing behind Laxus. Laxus instructed one of the green-haired male mages, Freed, when you set up the magic barrier tomorrow, add a clause, prohibit cats from leaving the guild. Prohibit cats? Happy, Freed was momentarily stunned. He remembered the guild's only cat being Happy, raised by Natsu, but Happy had no fighting ability. Prohibiting Happy from leaving the guild was pointless. It was known that the fewer conditions required to set up a magic barrier, the greater its power. The more conditions, the weaker the power. The original plan had only 2 conditions, prohibiting anyone over 80 years old and the stone statues from leaving. The aim was to prevent the strongest guild master from participating in the battle and to use the stone statues as hostages. Now, prohibiting the cats from leaving makes it 3 conditions. Not Happy, during the months you are carrying out a mission to destroy the Dark Guild, a new cat joined the guild. That cat is named George. If we don't restrain him, he might become even more troublesome than Urza and Mystigan, Laxus replied. He had been preparing for this plan for a long time and had been closely monitoring the guild's movements. Although he verbally criticized the guild's mages for being too weak, he was well aware of the guild's strength and was therefore very cautious. He knew a great deal about George's actions and the strength he had displayed. In his judgment, George was a fairly strong S-rank mage with many tricks up his sleeve, and he had to be restrained in advance. It's that mage who can do repair magic. It's a cat, and so powerful. Freed and the other 2 looked surprised. They had heard about the guild having a repair mage while on missions, who often cleaned up after the guild's mages. They just didn't know if it was a cat, or a cat that Laxus valued. After all, in the entire guild, besides the guild master, Gildards, who was on the century-long mission, only Mystigan caught Laxus's eye. Urza was just a minor nuisance in Laxus's eyes. The next morning, George flapped his wings, carrying the supplies for the evening's magical parade, and walked back to the guild. The entire town was now adorned with colorful balloons and ribbons, and every household was decorating their houses and nearby streets for the harvest festival. The citizens wore happy smiles, and children were playing and fighting in the streets, dressed as fairy tale guild mages. For the people of this town, the harvest festival was probably equivalent to Christmas or the Lunar New Year. Meanwhile, he saw a steady stream of people emerging from the train station and merging into the town's crowds. Some were residents returning home for the harvest festival, much like migrant workers returning home for the spring festival. Others were citizens from other towns who had come to visit. Fairy Tale's annual magical parade was a renowned event throughout the continent. Guildmaster, Mira Jane, have you finished shopping? After turning a corner, he saw Mira Jane and Makarov, who were also in charge of purchasing, waiting for him at the intersection. The 3 checked their items to make sure nothing was missing, then chatted as they walked back to the guild. The atmosphere of the harvest festival is everywhere. Makarov looked at the joyful citizens around him, a satisfied smile spreading across his old face. Mira Jane smiled and said, yes, everyone in the guild is preparing their magical performances for tonight's magical parade. That's right, it's Fairy Tale's grandest parade, the one that reigns supreme across the entire continent. George, you'll lead the way with that thunder giant Urza mentioned. Give everyone a real eye-opener. Makarov proudly raised his head. The magic used in the magical parade doesn't need to be incredibly powerful, but it must be spectacular, and George's thunder giant looks spectacular. It would be great if Laxus could participate. His lightning magic would definitely be even more effective paired with George, Mira Jane said with some regret. Although Laxus refused to return to help during the Phantom Lord's invasion, According to information she later gathered from Gadgiel and Juvia, no branch members participated in the final attack. Besides Mystigan destroying many branches, some were also destroyed by Laxus and his Thunder God Legion. So that guy was just being hypocritical. He seemed indifferent on the surface, but deep down he cared a lot. In George's words, Laxus was a bit rebellious and arrogant. Makarov's expression immediately changed upon hearing Laxus's name. HMPH, don't mention that rebellious grandson to me, Guildmaster. I actually think you should lay some things out with him, otherwise the misunderstandings will only grow bigger, and eventually problems will arise, George advised. He often consulted Makarov about magic and listened to Makarov recount his past. He knew that Laxus had once greatly admired his grandfather Makarov, until Makarov expelled his father, Ivan, from the guild, which created a rift between them. Makarov worried that telling Ivan the truth about the guild's betrayal would traumatize young Laxus, so he kept it a secret. Therefore, Laxus never knew that his father had connections with dark mages and betrayed the guild, nor did he know his father's ambitions. He only thought that his father wanted to change the guild, and that his ideals clashed with his grandfather's, leading to his grandfather's expulsion. From Laxus's perspective, this was understandable. His mother died early, and his father had been so good to him since childhood, even going to great lengths to find him Dragon Crystal, only to be driven away by his grandfather for such a reason. How could he possibly accept that? That's why he kept saying things like he wanted Makarov to step down and become the guild leader. After spending some time with him, and through occasional assessments using his psychic abilities, he felt that Laxus was deeply devoted to both his grandfather Makarov and the guild. He was just a bit too proud and awkward. If Makarov could open up and talk to Laxus, explaining everything clearly, there shouldn't be any major problems. Sigh, forget it. Even if I told him now, he might not believe me anyway, Makarov sighed. Chapter 277 The Sneak Attack on the Beauty Pageant. Greetings everyone. Thank you for waiting. The beautiful fairies are vying for attention, and the Fairy Tale Miss Contest is about to begin. I am your host, the Sand Mage Marcos. At 10 a.m., the Fairy Tale Miss Contest officially commenced in the guild's first floor lobby. Marcos, as the host, stood on the stage and used the magical microphone to explain the rules of the contest. At the front row of tables sat the judges, Guildmaster Makarov, representing the guild's mages, the mayor, representing the Magnolia City government officials, the merchant guild representative, representing the Magnolia City merchants, and the citizen representative, representing the Magnolia City citizens. The average score from these four judges would be each contestant's score, and the contestant with the highest score would be the champion, receiving a prize of 500,000 joules. Behind the judges sat the guild's mages and the city's citizens, holding banners to cheer on their favorite female mages. Ordinary citizens in this world also have their fans, but instead of ordinary entertainment stars, they idolize the mages of various guilds. George, Happy, Natsu, Gray, and others sat at a table, chatting and watching the competition. Although he was a cat in this world, he was essentially a man, and naturally, he wouldn't bother going to the library to read magic books for such a rare beauty pageant. Occasionally relaxing and looking at beautiful women could improve his study efficiency. Now, please welcome our number one contestant, the exotic beauty with an otherworldly stomach, Kana Alperona. Kana, with her long, black, curly hair, walked onto the stage holding her magic cards. It's time for the magic demonstration. The host quickly stepped aside. Kana tossed her magic cards into the air, and they immediately emitted a beautiful light that enveloped her body. When the light faded, her clothes had been changed into a sexy bikini set. The lecherous crowd below cheered excitedly, and the judges awarded her high scores one after another. Do you know why Kana is participating in this competition? Because she owes the guild a lot of money for drinks, and she wants to win the prize money to pay it back. Happy gossiped to everyone while sitting at the table. In the entire guild, besides Mira Jane, Happy was always at the forefront of gossip, always on the front lines. Kana started drinking when she was 13. Mira Jane's statistics show that Kana alone accounts for a third of the guild's annual drink sales. A third? She's practically a reincarnation of the god of wine, George exclaimed in amazement. The guild sells a considerable amount of drinks every day, and most mages who come to the guild will have a couple of drinks, whether they have something to do or not. But considering that Kana always seems to be drinking, sometimes even chugging from the barrel, it's understandable. She might not be number one in the beauty pageant, but she'd definitely be number one in the drinking contest. Speaking of which, Kana's card magic is quite interesting. She can summon wind, fire, and lightning, and recently she even learned card sealing magic from Hugh in the Tower of Paradise. His strength within the guild is second only to Natsu and Gray's group. In other guilds, he'd already be capable of advancing to S-rank mage. He has a card magic book in the library, and after returning from the 100 Years quest, he plans to include it in his learning plan. Especially Hugh's card sealing technique. His clone in the Mage Apprentice world is currently learning Balthazar Matryoshka doll sealing technique, which he can then combine with the card sealing technique. Next up is contestant number 2, a newcomer to the guild, but possessing S-rank strength, the ever-dripping good woman, Juvia rocks. Wearing a blue coat and sporting short hair, Juvia appeared, her body transforming into water as she danced in the air, ending in a blue bikini outfit. After the Phantom Troop incident, Guildmaster Makarov recruited both Juvia and Gagiel into the guild. According to Makarov, the two weren't inherently bad, they were simply led astray by Guildmaster Phantom Troop. That's innate ability, isn't it? George thought to himself, watching Juvia's body turn into water. Juvia's water magic differs from that of ordinary mages, it's innate. Before learning to control a magic, she could make rain fall wherever she was, earning her the nickname Rain Woman. Therefore, her magic, which transforms her body into water and grants immunity to physical attacks, is something George cannot learn. Just as there are natural-born legilimency, natural-born prophet, and natural-born disguise magus in the Harry Potter world, some people in the fairy tale world are born with magical abilities. Juvia's water magic is innate, she only later learned corresponding magic to enhance it. Fairy tale also has such mages. According to Mira Jane, Abram, one of Laxus's Thunder Legion members who uses fairy magic, was born with eyes that could petrify people. Because she couldn't control them, she usually wore glasses to block them. After Juvia, the most popular and biggest favorite in this competition appeared, her beauty widely known throughout the continent, the face of fairy tale, Mira Jane Strauss. Mira Jane, however, clearly had no interest in winning the championship. Her performance consisted of comical scenes of her transforming her head into the heads of various guild mages, including Evan Happy and George's cat heads. Next up was Fairy Queen Urza, who used her transformation magic to turn her armor into an adorable gothic Lolita maid outfit, a charming contrast that captivated many. Urza loves buying clothes. Besides various magical armors, her dressing room is overflowing with clothes of all different styles. After Urza's high score, the petite and cute Levy took the stage, her snow-themed spells melting the hearts of many men. Following her was the sexy beauty Biska from the western continent, whose masterful magic gun performance stunned everyone. Finally, Lucy, who had entered Fairy Tale with George, used celestial spirit magic and, according to Happy's gossip, was participating in the beauty pageant for rent. Unfortunately, her magic performance was interrupted before it even began by a boisterous laugh. Oh ho ho ho. Fairy refers to me, beauty refers to me too, that's right, I am the real fairy, the champion naturally belongs to me. Abagrin, wearing a green dress, glasses, and holding a fan, Abagrin slowly walked out from backstage. Lucy was about to confront her when Abagrin instantly petrified her. Then the curtain rose, and Urza and the others who had just performed in the waiting area were all petrified. Seeing the situation was dire, the ordinary citizens immediately fled towards the guild's exit. Chapter 278 Counterattack and the Divine Palace. Abagrin, what are you doing? Undo the spell and restore them to normal. Guildmaster Makarov jumped onto the table, his beard bristling with rage. Abagrin, however, covered her mouth with her fan and chuckled, Guildmaster, I'm just adding some entertainment to the festival. Fairy tale guys, the festival is only just beginning. A bolt of lightning struck the stage, and Laxus, draped in a coat, made a dazzling entrance. Beside a pillar in the guild hall, the remaining two members of the Thunder God clan, Frieda and Biggleslow, also emerged. Let's have some fun, old man. Laxus, you brat, stop this nonsense. Restore them to normal right now. Makarov's body involuntarily swelled with rage. Laxus immediately unleashed a bolt of lightning towards the petrified Lucy. Old man, I advise you not to make a move. They're all my hostages now. How about this? Let's play a game, the fairy tale's strongest battle. The rules are, fight to the last one standing to see who's the strongest. The arena is the entire Magnolia City, and the time limit is 3 hours. If there's no winner after 3 hours, they'll all be reduced to dust. Just as Laxus finished speaking, Abramer screamed and was suddenly pulled into the ground by a cat's tail. Before anyone could react, Lucy, Urza, and the other petrified female mages instantly had their magic dispelled and returned to normal. Then, George pulled the stunned Abramer up from a table. The fairy tale's strongest battle is interesting, but Lexus, I don't think it should be conducted with hostage threats like this. It turned out that the moment Lucy was petrified, George had used his mental power to scan the hall and discovered the hidden Lexus and two others, as well as the petrified Urza and the others behind them. Guessing that Lexus was up to something, he telepathically told Gray beside him to quickly create a thin layer of ice on the floor of the guild hall using ice magic. Then he used mirror magic to enter the mirror world. Just as Lexus appeared there, George had already arrived at Abramere's feet in the mirror world. He then dragged Abramere into the mirror world with his tail, and before Abramere could react, he shocked her unconscious with electricity. Abramere's petrification magic, unlike the basilisks, doesn't petrify indefinitely and requires constant control. Therefore, she can dispel it remotely and can also shatter petrified individuals at any time. Similarly, if someone is stunned and loses control, the petrification magic automatically dissipates. This ability is frankly very powerful, especially against enemies unaware of her eye abilities, making it easy to launch a surprise attack. Even a mage of Urza's caliber fell victim when caught off guard. Well done, George. Seeing the petrification magic completely dispelled and Lucy and the others saved, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Laxus, freed, and Beagleslow frowned. Their plans had been disrupted. Without hostages, it would be difficult to get the guild's mages to fight with all their might. Laxus is right, this cat is indeed a big problem. Laxus, that's enough for today. You and the Thunder Gods should apologize to everyone properly and then accept the harshest punishment until they forgive you. Makarov, now back to his normal form, roared at Laxus. Laxus, veins bulging, laughed loudly. It seems I underestimated you. In that case, let's play big. He pointed to the sky. And a bolt of lightning shot through the guild and into the sky above the entire city. The lightning orbs that had been floating above the city were activated. I have activated the Temple of Divine Resonance. From now on, everyone in the city is my hostage. If you don't continue this game, then you will perish along with everyone in the city. Laxus, is it necessary to go this far? Freed hesitated. He knew Laxus well, knowing that Laxus deeply loved the guild and only wanted to prove himself, gain the position of guild leader, and make the guild better. However, activating the Temple of the Gods and taking ordinary people hostage seemed excessive. He worried that Laxus might regret it if things went wrong. Fried, this is already a war, and it won't end until either side is completely wiped out. If you can't follow me, then disappear. My fairy tale doesn't need weak cowards. Laxus was enveloped in lightning, his reason gradually slipping away. Fried sighed and bowed to Laxus. Whatever decision you make, we will follow you. The Temple of the Gods. Laxus, have you gone mad? Makarov's face changed drastically when he heard that Laxus had actually activated the Temple of the Gods, his veins bulging, clearly enraged to the extreme. George, somewhat curious, asked Mary Jane, who had recovered and walked over, what is the Temple of the Gods? The ability to hold an entire city hostage and instill such fear in Makarov was clearly no ordinary magic. Mira Jane explained gravely, the Temple of the Gods is a forbidden lightning magic. By injecting lightning into 300 pre-made magic crystals and then activating it with a special magic circle, it can instantly unleash a terrifying power capable of destroying a town. Moreover, it cannot be destroyed before activation. Each time a magic crystal is destroyed, the same lightning will backfire onto the attacker. That's certainly troublesome. George stroked his beard. Old man, I'm not crazy. I'm doing this for the good of the guild, just like you drove father away back then. Want to end this game? It's simple, hand over the guild leader position to me now. Once I become guild leader, I will change this cowardly and hopeless guild, making it the truly strongest guild, a guild that no one will dare to challenge again. Laxus's aura as a top-tier S-rank mage erupted, making everyone feel suffocated. Makarov trembled with rage. Impossible, Laxus. I'd rather die than pass the guild leader position to you. In that case, let the game begin. Laxus's expression became even more ferocious upon hearing this. Just as he was about to leave and begin his next plan, George suddenly interrupted him. Wait, Laxus, there's something you might not know. Your father, Ivan, was expelled from the guild because he betrayed it and secretly contacted mages from the Dark Guild. The guildmaster didn't tell you because he didn't want to upset you. At this point, of course, the priority was to clear up the misunderstanding. If that failed, fighting wouldn't be too late. Chapter 279 George's True Strength. What did you say? Hearing George's words, Laxus froze, then turned to Makarov in disbelief. Old man, is what he said true? Laxus, it's true. I haven't told you because I was afraid you couldn't accept it. Alright, that's enough for today. Don't continue this nonsense, Makarov sighed, sitting weakly on the table. Things had come to this point, and it was indeed time for Laxus to know the truth. Otherwise, Laxus would make the same mistakes as his father, making one wrong step after another until it was irreversible. Actually, when George mentioned this that morning, he had already regretted not telling Laxus sooner. Sometimes it's like that, if you keep something hidden for too long, you don't know how to explain it anymore. Hearing Makarov's confirmation, Laxus fell silent, slowly lowering his head. Something's not right, however, just when everyone thought Laxus would stop his plans after learning the truth, George frowned. Because he sensed Laxus's magical energy was surging wildly, and the aura emanating from his mind wasn't one of regret or clarity, but rather of rage. What a joke. Telling me this now? Even if it's true, so what? My decision won't change. The game continues. If you don't play my game, not only the entire town's inhabitants, but you all, disappear. Laxus raised his head, veins bulging on his face, even the surrounding lightning turning a faint red with rage. With that, he, along with Freed and Bister, vanished from the guild in a flash of lightning. Fight. Only the victor among you is qualified to challenge me. You have 3 hours. If a victor isn't decided within 3 hours, I will destroy the entire town and the guild, and rebuild a new fairy tale. Looks like I'll have to use force to wake him up, George thought to himself as Laxus and the Thunder Gods disappeared. In Laxus's situation, there are usually 2 outcomes. Most likely, he'll suddenly realize his mistake, apologize to Makarov, and their grandfather-grandson relationship will be restored. However, there's a small chance that, due to pride, long-held obsessions, and a jumble of conflicting thoughts, he might refuse to acknowledge his true feelings and go to the other extreme. In this case, there's only one solution: beat him hard, beat him until he recognizes his true feelings, beat him until he comes to his senses. This is what's often referred to as the friendship-breaking punch in many stories. What do we do, Guildmaster? Everyone looked at Guildmaster Makarov. Makarov took a deep breath and made a difficult decision. I'll handle the matter of the Temple of the Roaring Gods. George, you have tracking magic. Lead the others to Laxus and capture him. He went too far this time. I'm expelling him from the guild. Having enhanced his physique with giant magic, he could withstand the magical backlash from destroying 300 magic crystals, making him the most suitable person to directly destroy the Temple of the Roaring Gods. And with George's magical skill, along with Urza, Natsu, and the others, they could easily take down Laxus and the remaining 2 members of the Thunder God clan. Laxus went too far this time, even considering destroying the entire town and guild. As the guild leader, for the sake of fairness, he had no choice but to expel him. Understood, guild leader. George waved his hand and cast a tracking spell, Direction Manifestation, Laxus Drawer. The current situation wasn't actually that troublesome for him. Even if the guild leader didn't intervene, he had many ways to deal with the magic from the Temple of the Roaring outside. The first was to withstand it head-on. He also knew giant magic, although not as powerful as the guild leader, it would still greatly enhance his defense. Moreover, his basic physique was far superior to the guild leader's, and he also inherited some of the magic resistance from the dragon after fusing with the dragon crystal, making his overall defense much higher than the guild leader's after his giant form. Most importantly, the Temple of the Roaring's backlash was all in the form of lightning, and he could control electricity, reducing the damage by at least 90%. Second, he could use mirror magic to pull the Temple of the Roaring directly into the mirror world, so that even if Laxus activated the Temple of the Roaring, it wouldn't be able to harm the town in reality. Third, with his current magical abilities and the amplification from his wand, he could set up a super-armored protective barrier covering the entire town, directly blocking the attack from the Temple of the Gods. The Temple of the Gods could destroy the town because it could simultaneously unleash 300 lightning attacks, covering the entire town. However, in reality, because the power of those lightning strikes was divided into 300 parts, each one wasn't particularly powerful. and the defense he constructed with his current level of magic could easily withstand it. As for capturing Laxus, he could handle it alone. This wasn't boasting or arrogance, nor was it overconfidence. His current overall magical ability actually surpassed the guild masters, definitely possessing the strength of a wizard 10, and a very well-rounded one at that, without any weaknesses. During this period, due to meditation to absorb the energy of the magic crystal and the space stone, coupled with the diligent training of his clones in various worlds, and the fusion with the magic dragon, his magic power had increased considerably. According to the Mage Apprentice world, his current magic power level had broken through from the previous 500 to over 800. This had also significantly amplified the power of his magic. Furthermore, having learned more magic and delved deeper into its study, through constant practice and combat, the power of each spell has significantly improved. His superpowers, under Kahara's extensive experimentation, are increasingly approaching those of a level 5 Esper. Finally, he fused with a dragon crystal from a demonic dragon, inheriting some of its power, and also fused with dragon crystals from different fire dragons in the Harry Potter world, greatly enhancing his physique. Therefore, his overall strength is now much greater than when he fought Jelil in the Tower of Paradise. Jelil's strength is at the level of the 10 wizard saints, and not a weak one at that. Judging from this, he is now at least a 10 wizard saint, and a very high-ranking one at that. Although Laxus is a lightning dragon slayer mage who can absorb and devour lightning, making his lightning magic and supernatural abilities less effective. Similarly, Laxus's lightning magic is unlikely to cause him much damage. Moreover, he possesses many other spells besides lightning magic, and his supernatural ability, electromagnetic, is not just about lightning, but primarily involves the control of metal. A golden magical arrow appeared, with George leading the way, followed closely by Makarov and the rest of the guild, heading towards the guild gate. Bang! However, just as George was about to step out, he was suddenly blocked by an infinite barrier. It's a spell barrier. George touched it and immediately realized that someone had set up a spell barrier around the guild beforehand. He had also studied spell barriers, though he wasn't as proficient. Chapter 280 Preparatory President George. Those over 80 years old and cats cannot leave. Several lines of text spelled out in the air in front of the guild gate appeared. It was Freed's doing. Makarov also reached out to touch it, but was stopped by the spell barrier. This is troublesome, indeed, a little troublesome. George had heard Levy say that in Fairy Tale, she wasn't the most skilled mage in spellcasting. The most skilled mage was actually Freed from the Thunder God squad. Freed was proficient in spellcasting in Dark Script, his strength extremely close to S rank, even stronger than the average S rank mage in other guilds. The characteristic of spellcasting is that it takes time to set up and must be set up in advance, but the effect is also very powerful. With the strength of the spellcasting set up by Freed, even Makarov of the 10 Wizard Saints couldn't force his way through. This was one of the reasons why Laxus dared to challenge an entire guild with just 4 people. Ha ha ha, since that's the case, then I, Natsu, will deal with Laxus. I've been wanting to settle things with him again for ages. Seeing this, Natsu took the lead and charged towards the guild's exit. Bang! With a loud crash, Natsu was bounced back by the magic barrier. Why is this happening? Natsu scratched his head, completely bewildered. Everyone else was equally confused. Urza and the others tried, and they all managed to get out. Finally, they discovered that only Makarov, George, Happy, Natsu, and Gadgil couldn't get out. That's strange. The magic barrier should execute exactly according to its set conditions. What's wrong with Natsu and Gadgil? George had set up magic barriers at school himself and understood their principles. Natsu and Gadgil were definitely not cats, which meant they were over 80 years old. But that was impossible. Aside from Gadgil, Natsu was someone the guild members had watched grow up. Forget it, now is not the time to think about that. George conjured a large mirror with a transformation charm, cast a mirror dimension spell on it, and handed it to Urza. Urza, you can fly. Take this mirror and suck all the magic crystals in the air into the mirror dimension. That way, the Temple of the Gods won't be able to harm the town's residents. Once we break the spell, we can go find Laxus. Leave it to me. Urza changed into her black feather armor and, clutching the mirror, flew rapidly towards the 300 magic crystals floating in the air. George, meanwhile, called to Levy to help him break the spell barrier set up by Freed. The other fairy tale mages, under Makarov's orders, didn't act rashly. Besides Gray and Juvia, The remaining mages would be easy prey even if they found Laxus and the Thunder God clan. Fried's spell is very complex, it might not be easy to solve. Levy examined the spell barrier and scratched her head with some difficulty. I need to go to the library to find some information. No need. I've memorized all the books on spells in the library. You can ask me for any information you need. George gestured across the barrier. This barrier seems to use Jilwinian magic, with 2 transformations. If the 2 of us work together, we should be able to solve it. In terms of spell barriers, he was only slightly better than a beginner, and there was still a considerable gap between him and Levy, let alone Fried. Naturally, he couldn't create a spell barrier like the one Fried set up, which could even trap the 10 Saints. But solving a spell is different from setting one. As long as you understand the laws of the spell, find its loopholes, and then make certain adjustments, you can actually solve the spell. Spell barriers are very useful against mages who don't understand spells, but even novice mages who do understand spells can gradually break them if they look up information and spend enough time. Therefore, spell barriers aren't mainstream magic in this world, they're a secondary spell studied by mages who practice textual magic. He had read all the spell books about spells in the library, memorized all the spell laws and related information, and could simultaneously focus all 6 of his brains on breaking the barrier. Even without Levy's help, he could break the barrier himself in 10 minutes. Normally, his main body and clones are learning and practicing different magic in various worlds, so this aspect isn't very noticeable. For example, his clone in the Harry Potter world is currently learning alchemy, his clone in the Wizarding Apprentice world is learning sealing magic, his clone in Academy City is learning Kabbalah spells, and his clone in Middle-earth is learning Elven magic. Only his clone in the main world doesn't have its own world's magic. It helps the clone in the world where the magic is difficult. However, when any of the clones in one of the worlds has a special need, George can control all the bodies in all worlds to temporarily put aside what they are currently learning and work together to help solve the problem in that world. Now, George is breaking Fried's spell barrier. In addition to the fairy tale world clone's brain performing high-speed analysis and calculation of the spell, the other 5 brains are also working in sync. With the 6 brains operating at high speed, plus Levy's cooperation, Fried's spell structure is being analyzed bit by bit. It is estimated that they can break the spell barrier in no more than 5 minutes. It's broken. 5 minutes later, Levy shouted excitedly under everyone's expectant gaze. George, I didn't expect you to be so talented in spells. You've reached this level in such a short time. The ability to break this spell in 5 minutes is mainly due to George's high-speed analysis of Fried's spell, which allowed her to quickly understand the entire structure of the spell. I just read more books, so I'm stronger in theory. You'll have to do the actual operation. George smiled and gave his seat to Levy. He certainly excelled in theory and the simultaneous operation of all 6 brains, but his practical skills were still far inferior to Levy's. Even now that Fried's entire spell had been fully analyzed and a plan to rewrite it existed, it would probably take him at least 10 minutes to complete the modification. Levy, on the other hand, could modify it in less than a minute, rendering the spell's barrier ineffective. I'm getting old. Perhaps it's time to find a successor to take my place, Makarov thought to himself, watching George from the very beginning. George hadn't been with the guild for long, but his contributions were immense. He possessed sufficient strength and a very stable personality, earning the recognition and respect of almost all the guild's mages. Even though George was a cat, it didn't really matter. Fairy Tale never cared about such things. At this moment, Makarov had decided that before George left to carry out the century-long mission, he would pass on the strongest super magic, fairy law, to him, ensuring that George could at least find Gilderts and return safely. Once George returned, he would step down and officially appoint George as the Guild Master of Fairy Tale. On the other hand, it was also because Laxus was his grandson, and he bore an unshirkable responsibility for what his grandson had done, making him feel guilty about continuing to serve as chairman. If George hadn't been going to carry out the century-old mission, he would have even considered passing the chairmanship to George after this magical parade. Chapter 281 Fairy Tale First Magic Tournament. All 300 magic crystals have been sent to the mirror world. Urza returned with a mirror, having successfully completed the task George had given her. Makarov stepped out of the guild hall. George, lead the way, we're going to find Laxus. Guided by George's tracking spell, over 100 fairy tale mages stormed out of the guild. Meanwhile, inside the Chaldea Cathedral in the city center, Laxus, The spell I set up at the guild has been broken, and Urza has collected all the magic crystals from the Temple of the Roaring Shrine into a mirror. Fried approached Laxus and reported the situation, a relieved expression on his face. He felt that even a real fight with the guild's mages wouldn't be a big deal, but if they actually opened the Temple of the Roaring Shrine and killed everyone, he and Laxus would definitely regret it later. The spell barrier has been dispelled, and the guild master has come out. We're probably in for a tough time now. Biggleslow, wearing a helmet and manipulating 5 small puppets, wore a grave expression. Even with their arrogance, they knew they couldn't possibly defeat the 100+ mages the guild master had personally led. Fairy Tail was not comparable to those dark guilds like Soul of the Corpse they had easily dealt with before. A guild master of the Wizarding 10 level, even Laxus couldn't guarantee defeating him, and a cat that seemed close to the Wizarding 10 strength. Below them were S-rank Urza, Gray, Natsu, Gajeel, and Juvia, and other powerful guild members. They were also missing Abrams, who possessed the petrifying eyes. The situation was extremely dire. You all forced me to this. Since that's the case, you old geezer, everyone in the guild, and all the residents of Magnolia City, disappear. Laxus's eyes were ferocious, his entire body enveloped in lightning, his size expanding under the powerful shockwave, his teeth becoming sharper, and dragon markings and scales faintly appearing on his body. He slowly brought his hands together, and a strong white light slowly emerged, instantly enveloping the entire sky above Magnolia City in a massive magic circle. Super magic, fairy law. As Makarov's grandson, wanting to replace Makarov as guild master, eliminate the weak within the guild, and lead it to the strongest, to prove his abilities and show that Makarov's decision to expel his father was a mistake. How could he not learn the guild's strongest super magic, fairy law? His perfectly crafted plan had failed at every step, and the frustration, coupled with his initial hesitation and uncertainty about his actions, ultimately led him to this insane decision to kill everyone. Laxus, that guy actually used this magic. What is he trying to do? Does he want to kill everyone? The Fairy Tail members, who were only a street away from the Chaldea Cathedral, were visibly shocked when they saw the magic circle suddenly appear above their heads. Makarov, in particular, turned green with rage. But the next second, his expression froze, and then he burst into laughter. George asked, somewhat confused, Guildmaster, is there something wrong with this spell? The super magic fairy law could instantly kill a wizard of 10 of the same level, and George naturally didn't want to experience it. He had originally planned to use mirror magic to take everyone into the mirror world for refuge, but seeing Makarov's change in expression, he knew that something unexpected must have happened. There's nothing wrong with the spell. Even if I cast this spell myself, it would only be to this extent. But don't worry, this spell won't harm us, nor will it harm the residents of the town. A hint of relief appeared on Makarov's face. The fairy law, a super magic spell, is one of our guild's 3 most powerful super magic spells, and also a legendary one. It uses holy light to combat darkness, targeting everything the caster considers an enemy. However, if the caster doesn't consider any enemy as a target or enemy, the spell won't work. So that's how it is. George and all the other mages immediately understood what Makarov meant. That is, although Laxus had cast fairy law on the entire town, because he didn't consider the guild's mages and the town's residents as enemies deep down, the spell wouldn't harm them. That's why Makarov was so happy, because it meant Laxus was just being stubborn and hadn't truly been corrupted by darkness like his father. No wonder we didn't feel threatened. George looked at the huge magic circle above them, shooting out dazzling light, but his intuition told him there was no danger. And indeed, after the light faded, everyone was unharmed, and the magic circle disappeared. How could this be? Why didn't I kill anyone? This shouldn't be happening. Laxus sensed that his magic hadn't harmed anyone, and a look of confusion crossed his face. Fried hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward and said, Laxus, have you forgotten? Fairy law only works on those you consider enemies. If you consider someone an ally, it won't work. You inherited not only magic from the guild master, but also a heart that cares for your comrades. Why don't we apologize to the guild master and end this? Laxus, I also don't think it's necessary to go this far. A wavering look appeared on Biggleslow's face. Laxus then roared, unleashing a powerful surge of electricity that blasted Fried and Biggleslaw away. No, this isn't right. How could I possibly consider those weaklings my allies? Everyone who stands in my way is my enemy. Let's have a good fight. Even without fairy law, I can defeat them all. Laxus, wake up. Just then, a huge fist punched in from outside the church door, sending Laxus staggering back several steps. Laxus looked up at the doorway and saw Makarov leading the entire guild in. Very well, let's fight. I'll take care of you all, Laxus. Makarov was about to start cursing the brat in front of him again, but George interrupted him. Guildmaster, I have an idea. Laxus's mouth was as stubborn as a duck that had been dead for 3 days. Continuing to curse him would only make him more rebellious. And now, George had a good idea. Perhaps we can hold the fairy tale first magic tournament. Chapter 282 Ancient Magic Mountain Moving Spell. Huh? Upon hearing George's words, Makarov, the fairy tale members, and Laxus, who was preparing to unleash his full power, were all stunned. What fairy tale first magic tournament? The so-called fairy tale first magic tournament is a competition where everyone uses magic to determine the guild's strongest mage. The fairy tale beauty pageant was interrupted, and now the townspeople and those from other cities are in a state of panic, thinking something's wrong with our guild. We can use the excuse of holding the fairy tale first magic tournament to cover up the chaos. From now on, we can hold the fairy tale first magic tournament in the afternoon during our annual harvest festival to determine the annual strongest fairy tale mage, followed by a magical parade in the evening. This will make the residents and tourists even happier. Also, Laxus, aren't you going to prove yourself and become guild master, leading the guild to the top? Then become the guild's strongest mage first. Otherwise, what qualifications do you have to take over as guild master and say you can lead the guild to the top? George explained his plan. He made this proposal for 3 reasons. First, of course, was to openly prove himself as the guild's strongest mage through his strength, paving the way for his future succession as guild master. Fairy Tale possesses 3 super magic spells, Fairy Law being only 1. There are 2 other super magic spells that Makarov hasn't mastered. Only Mavis Viviamilio, the first guild master who created the 3 super magic spells and was known as the Fairy Strategist, possesses them. Normally, only the guild master of each generation is qualified to learn the 3 super magic spells. Therefore, he definitely wants to become the guild master. Second, this way, the Laxus issue can be resolved more peacefully, avoiding a real fight that could ultimately lead to Laxus's expulsion from the guild. Since he's going to be the future guild master, he must think from the guild master's perspective. How can a mage like Laxus, whose strength is close to that of the Wizarding 10, be easily let go? He must find a way to keep him in the guild to strengthen its power. The key point is that the fairy law he just used also proves that Laxus is just being stubborn and arrogant. In reality, he really approves of and likes the guild. Thirdly, and finally, he felt that holding such a tournament could enhance the guild's reputation and motivate everyone to improve their strength, which wouldn't harm the guild's development. Agreed. I've been wanting to compete with everyone for a long time. Before Makarov could even speak, Natsu excitedly jumped out. Immediately afterward, Gray also took off his clothes and said, "If it's a competition like this, I want to try it too. That's how a man should act." Ha. Who's afraid of who? The fairy tale members, who could fight like madmen while drinking at the guild every day, weren't afraid of a competition. Hearing George's suggestion, they all rubbed their hands together eagerly. However, there were a few who were less willing, such as Lucy, a mage who lacked confidence in her strength, and Kana, a lazy mage who was only interested in alcohol. Laxus, what do you think? Makarov was initially hesitant, but seeing everyone's willingness, and with George's private message offering Laxus a way out, he agreed. Laxus was silent for a moment, then slowly raised his head and asked, "If I prove I'm the strongest, shouldn't the position of guild leader be passed to me? If you prove you're the guild's strongest mage, I have no objection to you becoming guild leader," George declared first. The others echoed his agreement. While Laxus's actions today had been somewhat excessive, the fairy law spell he used earlier proved his sincerity. Furthermore, he was the grandson of the highly respected Makarov. If his strength truly made him the guild's strongest, then no one would object to him becoming guild leader. Of course, for now, their best candidate for guild leader was still George. He had led them to numerous victories, often cleaned up their messes, and possessed a stable and mature demeanor. "George, are you sure you can beat Laxus? He's a lightning dragon slayer mage. You need to understand, your lightning magic won't work on him." Makarov's expression showed some worry. George nodded and replied telepathically, "Don't worry, Guild Master, I won't do anything I'm not confident about." Hearing George's affirmative reply, Makarov felt reassured. He knew George. If George said so, there shouldn't be a problem. So he solemnly announced, "All right, that's settled then. The champion of this fairy tale first magic tournament will be the guild's prospective guildmaster. Laxus, if you can win this championship, you can take over as guildmaster. If you can't, then you must apologize to everyone in the guild and never cause trouble again, and instead focus on doing missions properly." "Old man, it's a deal then." Laxus suppressed the lightning that was about to go berserk on his body, reached for the coat beside him, and draped it over himself. "Let everyone in town know that I am the strongest mage in fairy tale, and to take over the position of guildmaster in glory doesn't seem so bad." Fried and Biggleslow, who had been sent flying by lightning, exchanged a glance and simultaneously breathed a sigh of relief. Fighting the guildmaster and his group now was completely hopeless, and they also hoped Laxus could become guildmaster fairly and squarely, not by killing all his comrades and residents. If that were the case, it would be better to leave the guild and create a new one themselves. "Guildmaster, I have another suggestion. Since the winner of this competition can become guildmaster, shouldn't the second and third place winners also receive some rewards?" At this moment, George raised another suggestion, hoping to mobilize everyone in the guild to participate in the competition. Makarov was unusually generous. "Then, as long as you make it into the top 10, there will be a cash reward. Second place, 200,000, third place, 100,000, fourth to 10th place, 50,000 each." The fairy tale beauty pageant winner received 500,000, but because Laxus interfered and stopped it, he only needed to add another 350,000. Thanks to George, the guild's finances were no longer in deficit. A total of 850,000 was nothing for the guild now. As for the venue is in the middle of the lake. "I'll handle the details." George raised his hand and said. Letting everyone fight freely wouldn't work in the guild. Even with the guild now transformed into a moving castle, it couldn't withstand the aftershocks of everyone's all-out battle. Therefore, a sufficiently large venue was needed, ideally one that the entire town could see. He happened to have a spell that could solve this problem: ancient magic, mountain moving spell. Chapter 283 The Island in the Lake. Hearing about the prize money, Lucy and Kana, who hadn't originally planned to participate, also signed up. Meanwhile, George and Makarov briefly discussed the rules of the competition before spreading their wings and flying out of town. After scouting at high speed, he quickly found a suitable small mountain. Mountain movement. Waving his wand, he began chanting the ancient magic, the mountain moving charm. This was one of the ancient spells he had learned from Dumbledore, and like the thunderstorm spell, it required a long chanting time. Because the mountain moving speed was slow, enemies with even slightly faster movement speeds would have time to escape the attack range, making it less practical in combat, and he hadn't spent much time practicing it. Therefore, a normal casting time would be at least 10 minutes. But that didn't matter. He wasn't doing this for combat, but simply to move a small mountain to the large lake next to the guild city. This would create a small island in the lake, serving as the main stage for the tournament. Rise. As the incantation finished, the small mountain in front of George immediately began to shake, then intensified until it actually rose from the ground and gradually floated in the air. Go. Using his wand to control the mountain, George flapped his wings and carefully moved towards the large lake beside the town. As he flew over the city, he suddenly realized that while the mountain-moving spell might be a bit slow and inaccurate when used to hit people, its destructive power was considerable. For example, if you were to throw the mountain directly from the sky into the town below, the entire town would be completely destroyed, its power not much less than that of ordinary super magic. Meanwhile, the townspeople and tourists below, watching George bring a small mountain into the sky above the town, were all utterly terrified, their mouths agape. Is this also part of the Harvest Festival? Don't be afraid, everyone. I'm George, a mage from the Fairy Tale Guild. At 2 p.m. this afternoon, our guild will be holding the first Fairy Tale Grand Tournament on the island in the lake to determine the strongest Fairy Tale mage. If you're interested, you can go to the shore to watch the matches and cheer for our mages. Using a megaphone spell to announce the tournament to the entire town, George brought Koyama to the lake near the shore and slowly lowered him into the water. Plasma Cannon. Controlling the long plasma beam, a sweeping motion cut off the upper half of Koyama, leaving a large circular platform protruding from the lake surface. The makeshift arena was complete. As for the various decorations on the arena, Although they could be conjured with a transformation charm, he felt it was unnecessary. After all, in a real fight, those things would probably be lost. Also, there were no spectator seats on the island. The island wasn't far from the town's shore, so the townspeople could easily watch the matches from the shore. This was for the safety of the residents and also allowed the guild's mages to fight without worry. Upon hearing George's broadcast, the townspeople and tourists immediately began discussing it, then eagerly gathered towards the town's shore. Seeing how George created the island in the lake, they were all amazed by the power of the fairy tale mages. Ordinary people knew that mages were powerful, but they didn't really grasp the extent of their power. Magic that could move a mountain was beyond their imagination. Not only the townspeople, but even the fairy tale mages were shocked. They had never seen such magic before. Destroying a mountain was understandable, Urza and Natsu possessed such destructive power. But to make a mountain rise from the ground and then control it to fly and land somewhere, no mage had ever heard of such a feat. Not even their guild master, Makarov. After Makarov transformed into a giant, he did indeed have the power to lift a small mountain, but that meant lifting something as heavy as a small mountain, not actually carrying it on his shoulder. A mountain is inherently connected to the earth. How could it be uprooted? This cat is becoming increasingly unfathomable, Laxus murmured, his gaze growing increasingly serious as he watched George teleport into the guild. He had always thought his only rival in the guild would be Mystigan, but now it seemed that this cat, George, might be his greatest opponent. Mainly because it knew so much magic. He had previously assumed George's strongest magic was lightning, and as a lightning dragon slayer, he could absorb all lightning, making him a perfect counter. Therefore, he hadn't considered George a significant threat. What truly made him feel threatened was the enigmatic Mystigan, whose depths even he hadn't fully grasped. As for Urza, he felt that Abrams of the Thunder God clan could handle her. But after all that had just happened, he felt that George might be his biggest rival, and the old man's trust in George seemed to say something. You've got some skills, George. If I win in the end, you can be my cat. You deserve to be my cat, you can beat me first. George waved his paw and then said to Makarov, the arena is set up. Now you can enter. Okay, let me explain the rules of the match, Makarov said to the eager fairy tale mages. The rules are simple, draw lots to form pairs. The winner advances to the next round until a champion is decided. Losing consciousness or surrendering counts as a loss. Everyone, play according to your abilities. That's awesome. This time I must defeat Laxus and become the strongest mage. You should defeat me first. Natsu, don't underestimate us. After hearing the rules, everyone was fired up. Aren't Jelil and Mystigan participating? George asked in a low voice. Makarov shook his head. I contacted Gerald using the magic crystal, and Gerald said he already lost to you before, so he won't participate in this competition. As for Mystigan, I know he won't participate without even asking. He doesn't like being exposed to everyone. Mystigan even uses sleeping magic to make everyone unconscious when he returns to the guild, let alone compete on the island with the entire town watching. It's alright, this competition is voluntary anyway. George didn't mind either, raising his hand to use magnetic force to extract iron sands from the ground and condense it into a large iron plate. Everyone, get on, I'll fly you all over. He can now carry a weight of over 10 tons, so transporting everyone to the island isn't too difficult. As they flew to the island, the residents on the town's shore erupted in enthusiastic cheers and shouts of encouragement. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 284 Poor Natsu. Let's draw lots. On the island, Makarov took out a box he had prepared beforehand. There were a total of 110 mages who had signed up for the competition, so there were 55 pairs of slips of paper in the draw box. Those who drew slips with the same number would be their opponents in the first round. Everyone took turns drawing lots, and George was no exception. Number 23, seeing the number on his slip, George glanced around and quickly found a mage who had drawn the same number. It's George. My luck is terrible, the mage let out a wail upon learning that his opponent was George. The same wail came from mages who had drawn Laxus, Urza, the Thunder God clan, Natsu, and others. They knew roughly how strong these mages were and knew they definitely couldn't win. Everyone, Please enter your respective arenas according to the field numbers I have assigned. After the draw, Mira Jane flew through the air with a microphone and announced. Mira Jane was one of the few mages who hadn't participated in the competition, so she became the host of the tournament. The mountaintop area cut out by George was quite large, and Mira Jane used her magic pen to draw 55 arenas, allowing everyone to compete simultaneously in their respective arenas. So now, everyone just needs to find their arena according to the number they drew, and the fight can begin. This competition was a last-minute idea from George, without much preparation, and therefore without much complexity. It will be more refined next year, and naturally, it won't be as casual as it is today. Actually, it doesn't really matter, after all, they're all mages from the same guild, and everyone knows each other well. Calling it a competition is just a friendly sparring match. Many mages are aware of their own abilities, knowing that winning the championship is impossible, and even the chance of making it into the top 10 is slim. Except for a few, everyone is in a good mood. Those few naturally include Lucy, who desperately wants to make it into the top 10 to pay her rent, so she was very nervous during the draw, her hands trembling, fearing she would draw someone like George or Alexis, resulting in an immediate elimination. First round of preliminary matches begin, standing on their assigned numbers on the arena, amidst the cheers and shouts of the densely packed residents on the shore, and through Mira Jane's microphone, the matches began. Stun. In a flash, George appeared behind the opposing mage, casting a stun spell to knock him down. With his current magical level, enhanced by his wand, unless someone possessed special physique and magic, a simple stun spell was enough to subdue a mage below S rank. After dealing with his opponent, George heard a thunderclap from the next arena. Turning around, he saw Alexis had used lightning to stun his opponent. Similar events unfolded on several other arenas. Urza, Natsu, Gray, and others' opponents were all essentially defeated in one move. This was the difference in strength. The battles on the other arenas also ended quickly. For a normal mage, being hit by an opponent's magic a few times was generally enough to end the fight. Only mages with near-dragon physiques like Natsu could withstand various magical attacks and still stand up to continue fighting. The first round of preliminary matches ended in less than 10 minutes. We'll rest for half an hour, then proceed with the second round of drawing lots. Mira Jane announced after the preliminary matches concluded. The half-hour rest was, of course, to allow everyone to recover their magic power and stamina. Not all mages were like George, defeating their opponents in one move with virtually no exertion. Most mages had fought with all their might to achieve victory and naturally needed a short rest. The second round of drawing lots begins. Half an hour later, the 55 victors stepped forward again to draw lots, while the 55 losers became cheering spectators. This time, there were 27 pairs, with one receiving a bye. I'm number 28. I got a bye. That's fantastic. Lucy jumped up excitedly when she saw her number. For her, drawing a bye in this round meant she directly advanced to the third round. Winning in the third round would secure her a place in the top 14, bringing her very close to the prize money. Feint, another instant kill. Mages slower than him were practically helpless against his stun spell. He always cast it from behind, his wand pressed against the back of her head. Transformation, Emperor of Flames armor. After defeating his opponent, he heard gasps from near the center of the arena. A slight smile played on his lips as he flew towards the sound. Poor Natsu. It turned out that this round's draw had resulted in a clash of titans. Natsu and Urza had drawn the same number. There was no way around it, the draw was random. Even if he had drawn a match between him and Laxus in the first round, it was still possible. So, aside from the undisputed champion, the rest of the competition depended on luck in addition to skill. Like in the second round, one of Natsu and Urza would inevitably be eliminated. George guessed it was most likely Natsu. Because Natsu is the type of mage who can unleash extraordinary power against enemies, but against his comrades, he can only maintain his original strength. Especially against Urza, who has been beating him since childhood and almost traumatized him, his strength would be significantly weaker. It can only be said that he was unlucky, not that he only had the strength of the second round. Sure enough, after fighting for more than 20 minutes, Natsu was defeated by Urza. But this exciting battle also pushed the atmosphere of the competition to a climax. After another half hour of rest, the third round of draws began. This time there were only 14 arenas and 28 contestants, with the rest serving as spectators. Among them, many powerful mages were matched up in advance, becoming the focus of the audience's attention. For example, Abermora, the member of the Thunder God clan with the petrifying eyes, fought against Elfman Strauss, who could now receive the Beast King after the Phantom Lord battle. Grey, the Ice-Clad, fought against Biceps, one of the members of the Thunder God clan. Levy, who is very close to George, fought against Gagiel, who had attacked her before but failed. George himself was facing Juvia, a former S-rank mage from Phantom Lord. Even George, I won't give up. Juvia will show Lord Grey an even more dazzling Juvia, who fell in love with Grey at first sight and pursued him relentlessly, even joining his guild, showed no weakness against George, immediately entering a water-based mode that rendered physical attacks ineffective. Although she had witnessed both the Phantom Lord battle and the Tower of Paradise, she knew George's strength was far beyond her capabilities. Water binding, a surging torrent of water enveloped George completely from beneath his feet. Chapter 285 Lucy, favored by Lady Luck. Water binding, Juvia's signature water magic. Once hit, the body will float in a water sphere, unable to move, and eventually suffocate. Water slash, seeing that the water sphere had trapped George, Juvia didn't dare to be careless. She immediately conjured more than a dozen water blades, slashing at George from all directions. George, however, was unconcerned. Apparition, in a flash, he teleported away from the water sphere, appearing not far behind Juvia, dodging all the attacks. 7 billion volts, a powerful current erupted from George's body, flowing along the water on the ground and striking the water-transformed Juvia. Water transformation can ignore any physical attack, but it cannot be immune to magical attacks. In addition, lightning magic is naturally effective against water magic, and Juvia is instantly electrocuted and released from her water transformation state. Water whip, enduring the spasms and tremors caused by the electric current, Juvia controlled her water whip to lash at George, trying to stop him from releasing more electricity. However, George's body flashed with lightning speed, easily dodging the water whip attack and appearing before her with his petite cat-like form. Sorry, Juvia, he tapped Juvia's forehead with his wand. Faint, Juvia immediately lost consciousness and collapsed to the ground. Athel 8, the winner is George. Mira Jane flew over and loudly announced the result after seeing the match end. The fairy tale mages who had been eliminated began to discuss among themselves. Juvia is an S-class mage, yet she was defeated so easily by George. George's strength is getting stronger and stronger. Most of the fairy tale mages didn't know the specifics of the Tower of Paradise incident, and their understanding of George's strength was still based on his fight with Phantom Lord. Back then, George was strong, but not as strong as he was now. The entire process of fighting the S-class Juvia was effortless. It was clear at a glance that they were not on the same level. After removing the stun spell from Juvia, George began to pay attention to the matches in the other arenas. Lexus is indeed strong, basically defeating all enemies in one hit. This time, he faced Sarusuk from Levy's team, who was also quite strong, but was similarly defeated in one move. A Baborglin fought Elfman. Due to her petrifying eyes, Elfman could only fight with his eyes closed, and coupled with a Baborglin's ability to fly, he was ultimately petrified and suffered a crushing defeat. Levy fought Gagiel, and Levy won, but George could tell that Gagiel was holding back. The reason is intriguing. The most eye-catching and longest fight was between Grey and Biggleslow. Both were evenly matched, and in the end, they almost simultaneously exhausted their magic, were severely injured, and collapsed, resulting in a draw. However, due to their severe injuries, they could not continue to the next round and were eliminated together. Therefore, the final winners of the third round were 13 people: George, Laxus, Urza, Ababorglin, Levy, Freed, Kana, Marceau, Wakaba, Biska, Alzak, Warren, and Lucy. Great, Lucy has successfully advanced to the top 13. Actually, in George's opinion, Lucy's strength is quite formidable, she just lacks confidence. Excluding the other celestial spirits, Aquarius and Leo alone would be S-rank in any other magic guild. So, in a real battle, Lucy's strength would definitely be enough to enter the guild's top 10. However, today she clearly didn't need much strength, because her luck was too good. In the fourth round of the draw, she received a bye, directly advancing to the top 7 without a fight. Natsu, that's awesome. I made it into the top 7. I can get a 50,000 yen bonus, and next month's rent is covered. After the draw, Lucy excitedly ran over to tell Natsu, who was sitting on the ground. Natsu was still brooding over his defeat to Urza in the second round. Hearing Lucy's words, he replied listlessly, "Why didn't you take the free dorms from the guild and insisted on renting a place? I'm more used to living alone, it's more free that way." Seeing Natsu's bad mood, Lucy comforted him, "Don't be discouraged. Losing to Urza is normal, she's Urza, after all." Happy, sitting next to Natsu, pulled a fish from his small bag, ate it, and muttered, "They're definitely hooked." In the fourth round, across 6 arenas, George's opponent was relatively weak this time, Wallen Racco, who was skilled in telepathic magic. The fight was basically over in one hit. Telepathic magic is similar to telepathy, allowing for mind reading and telepathic communication within a certain range during battle. Unfortunately, Warren couldn't read George's mind, given his telepathic abilities and occlumency. George was still very interested in telepathic magic, believing that learning it would enhance his telepathic abilities and the effects of legilimency. He planned to include this type of magic in his learning plan after returning from the 100 Years quest. After defeating his opponent, George joined the others to watch the matches in the other arenas. Soon after, the fourth round ended, and the top 7 were determined: George, Laxus, Urza, Abramorg, Freed, Kana, and Lucy. Laxus and the Thunder Gods were indeed strong, aside from Begusro and Grey being forced to leave early due to injuries. Abramorg and Freed all advanced, and their battles were generally quite easy. The fifth round draw began. Laxus faced Kana, Urza faced Abramorg, George faced Freed, and Lucy received the bye again. "I must be blessed by Lady Luck today," Lucy exclaimed happily. Laxus defeated Kana decisively. Urza faced Abramorg, and what was expected to be a fierce battle turned out to be a false eye, allowing Urza to ignore Abramorg's petrifying eye. She easily defeated Abramorg, showing Abramorg who the true fairy queen was. In the final match, George faced Freed. "I know you're strong, but I must defeat you today, because only then can Laxus become the guild master." Freed stood opposite George, drawing his magic sword. "You might not know, but although I haven't reached S rank in the guild, I've defeated quite a few S-rank dark mages outside." If he could defeat George this round, Laxus would undoubtedly be the tournament champion, thus smoothly taking over as guild master. That newcomer Lucy relied entirely on luck and was utterly insignificant. Urza, while her strength somewhat exceeded his expectations, defeating Abrams, was definitely no match for Laxus. It was this George, his strength was unfathomable. Whether it was his performance in the intelligence reports or his recent mountain-moving and mountain-cutting magic, it proved his strength was at least S-rank, and a strong one at that. He posed a significant threat to Laxus. Chapter 286 Fairy Tale's Strongest Mage Showdown. Freed's purpose in participating in the tournament was to clear away the obstacle of George for Laxus. Even if he ultimately lost, the large amount of magical energy he would consume would lighten Laxus's burden. Although Laxus would certainly disdain his actions, he had to do it for Laxus's sake. This wasn't cheating, it was simply a strategy. "Your strength is not bad, so let's begin." George nodded and beckoned to Freed with his cat paw. He wasn't very clear about Freed's magic, and neither were the other mages in the guild, they only knew the general outline. This was because the Thunder Gods, like Laxus, were rather solitary and didn't often play with others. George only knew that Freed was proficient in spellcasting and dark text magic. He had already witnessed the spellcasting at the guild gates. It was indeed very powerful, and it took him and Levy quite a while to decipher it. As for dark text magic, he had seen Freed use it in the previous battle, leaving magical characters like Fear and Pain on the enemy with a rapier, causing them fear and pain. This way, Freed could easily defeat his opponent who was under the influence of the dark runes. Freed's close combat and swordsmanship skills were also formidable. However, given that Freed was the leader of the Thunder God clan and had a record of defeating S-class mages multiple times, his methods were probably not limited to this. Forbidden dark runes, dark, Freed unleashed his ultimate move, casting dark rune magic on himself with his rapier. Dense dark power entered his body through the dark runes, and in the blink of an eye, his body transformed from human form into demon form with 2 horns on his head. His physical strength and magical power increased dramatically. Dark runes, wings. Immediately afterward, a second dark rune was engraved on his body, and black energy wings stretched out from his back. In a flash, he transformed into a black light and attacked George. Interesting, seeing that rune magic had such a use, George was also intrigued. The rune magic he had always learned was similar to Levy's rune magic, using words to cast various magical effects. He never expected that he could actually cast rune magic on himself to strengthen himself. As expected, many spells in the library were merely foundations for various other spells. Truly powerful mages, after learning these foundations, would develop them further according to their own circumstances. For example, Urza developed a simple transformation spell into a more powerful night spell. It's no wonder that most mages in this world only learn one type of spell. Because, apart from true prodigies like Jelil, it's extremely difficult for an average mage to develop a high-level application of a single spell. It's over. Just as Fred circled behind George, preparing to launch a sneak attack, George's body suddenly expanded rapidly, transforming from a palm-sized kitten into a behemoth over 30 meters tall. Surrounded by electricity, his cat-like paw slapped Fred, now transformed into a demon, with lightning speed, like swatting a fly, directly slamming him into the arena floor, knocking him unconscious. One-hit kill. The fairy tale mages who had been somewhat worried about George were instantly dumbfounded. Even Laxus, whose battle had already ended, had wide-eyed stares. Laxus had a premonition that Freed might not be able to defeat George. But he never expected that he would be instantly defeated by George. Freed, in his demon form, had defeated several S-class mages, and his strength was definitely not weak. The winner is George. Mira Jane, regaining her senses, flew above George and announced the result. George then returned to his normal cat size. Freed in his demon form was indeed strong, but unfortunately, his gigantic size, combined with lightning stimulation to his body and the physique inherited from the dragon, meant his overall strength exceeded Makarov's limit for giant transformation among the 10 wizard saints. Even in his demon form, Freed was far inferior. Furthermore, cats are naturally fast, and Freed couldn't even use his speed advantage to attack before being swatted down. The 5th round of matches ended, and the final round draw began. Laxus faced Urza, and George faced Lucy. The winners would determine the champion. The losers would then compete for the runner-up and 3rd place. Half an hour later, the semifinals began. In the semifinals, as Makarov intended, the matches weren't played simultaneously but were split into 2. The first match was between George and Lucy. Unsurprisingly, Lucy lost, but she didn't concede immediately. Instead, she summoned Aquarius from the lake outside the arena, nearly flooding the entire island. This proved her formidable power when unleashed. The second match was between Urza and Laxus. Frankly, this was the most anticipated battle. Even George watched intently. Both Urza and Laxus were S-class mages within Fairy Tail who had passed the Guildmaster's test. Their strength was at the top of the S-class, perhaps even reaching the level of the 10 wizard saints. While Urza's previous strength might have been inferior to Laxus, after the Tower of Paradise incident, defeating the top S-class mage Ikaruga, and seeing her true self, the outcome was truly uncertain. George, for one, was unsure whether Urza or Laxus would ultimately win this battle. The battle began, and Urza immediately donned the Thunder Emperor armor, which offered extremely high resistance to lightning. Wearing the Thunder Emperor armor and wielding a lightning spear, her hair styled in braids with ribbons, Urza looked incredibly dashing, drawing cheers and encouragement from the spectators on the shore. Laxus, meanwhile, also used his lightning dragon slayer magic with great seriousness. The battle was fierce, with both sides exchanging blows. In the end, Laxus's dragon slayer magic prevailed, absorbing the lightning released by Urza's lightning spear, destroying her Thunder Emperor armor, and stunning her before she could change her armor. However, he was also exhausted, and could only claim a narrow victory. I never imagined Urza's strength would reach this level. At this moment, Laxus realized he had truly underestimated the guild's mages. Urza, whom he had previously looked down upon, was actually only slightly weaker than him. And the strength of Natsu and Gray in the previous battle was far greater than he had anticipated. Could it be that his philosophy was truly wrong, and the old man's philosophy was correct? Half an hour later, Mira Jane flew through the air and announced to everyone via microphone, "Now, we will begin the final match. This match will determine the strongest mage of our Fairy Tail Guild this year. At the same time, it will also determine the next Guild Master of Fairy Tail. Will it be Laxus, who possesses the Lightning Dragon Slayer magic, or our future Cat Guild Master, George? Please look forward to it." Chapter 287 The Elegant Ranged Mage. George. Mira Jane's words had barely faded when the guild's mages erupted in cheers for George. Clearly, in their hearts, George was their most favored successor, even though he had only been with the guild for less than a year, while Laxus had grown up there. Laxus. Laxus, freed, who had just woken from his coma, immediately joined Biggles and Abrams in shouting, their voices cracking as they barely managed to stand out amidst the chorus of calls for George. This was mainly because everyone felt a little sorry for Freed and his companions, seeing how hysterical they were. After all, they were comrades, so they lowered their voices slightly. It seems you are the one everyone wants, Laxus said, a hint of disappointment in his voice as he listened to the cries for George, but he quickly rallied. It's alright. As long as I defeat you and let them know who the guild's strongest mage is, they'll naturally support me. This world has always been ruled by the strong. Well, then meet me first. George knew that saying anything now would inevitably lead to a fight, so he was too lazy to preach any more principles. Deep down, he actually agreed with Laxus's statement. It's just that he wasn't as extreme as Laxus. The strong are respected, in any world. Without sufficient strength, relying solely on emotions and bonds cannot rewrite tragedy. Then let's go. Laxus pointed at George. Lightning bolt. A bolt of lightning descended from the sky, striking directly at George's head. George was covered in electricity, raised his catpaw and swung it to the right, diverting the lightning to his right. At the same time, he took out a coin from his transformation space and flicked it at Laxus. Railgun. Driven by the electricity, the coin shot towards Laxus at supersonic speed. Laxus remained calm, simply sucking in the lightning crackling on the coin that was almost in front of him. Simultaneously, he grabbed the coin, now worn down to half its original size. The first test was over. George confirmed that Laxus, like Natsu, could absorb energy of the same element, and Laxus confirmed George's control over lightning. I can't use electric magic or abilities anymore, George quickly decided. Electromagnetic cannons, plasma cannons, lightning giants, and the ancient magic thunderstorm descent wouldn't work on Laxus. Instead, they would be absorbed and strengthened. Therefore, he could only use his lightning control to weaken Laxus's lightning attacks. But that didn't matter. Lightning was just one of his many spells and abilities. The wand in this world was one of the best in all his worlds, capable of maximizing the power of magic from the Harry Potter world. Even without lightning magic or abilities, it would be enough to deal with Laxus. Lightning suit. On the other side, after a round of probing, Laxus immediately abandoned his ranged lightning magic attacks, instead concentrating all his magic power and lightning on himself, greatly stimulating and strengthening his body, intending to engage in close combat. Mages skilled in elemental control weren't uncommon in this world, like Usagi, one of the 4 phantom elementals, who could control fire, causing Natsu considerable trouble initially. However, he wasn't a useless dragon slayer like Natsu, his lightning wasn't so easily controlled. But against this type of mage, directly using lightning magic, even if he managed to forcefully seize control and land a hit, would be significantly weakened. The best approach was to concentrate his magic power and lightning on himself, then engage in close combat using magic attacks that were harder to control. Furthermore, as a dragon slayer, his physical body was already powerful, and amplified by lightning, he was even stronger. Although his opponent had learned the old man's giant magic and defeated Freed in one blow, his close combat ability was definitely not weak, but he had more confidence in himself. He believed that he would be the one standing on the stage in the end. Thunderbolt Fist. Laxus transformed into lightning, throwing a punch at George. George, however, waved his wand. Obstacles. A blue-green spark flashed before the wand, instantly slowing Laxus, who had entered elemental form at incredible speed, out of it. The Obstacles Charm. This was a very useful high-level spell he had recently discovered and learned. Originally, he thought the Obstacles Charm was a spell that created obstacles on the ground, which seemed rather useless, so he hadn't bothered to learn it. It wasn't until he studied time magic that he discovered that the Obstacles Charm, like the Freezing Charm and the Restoration Charm, belonged to the extended category of time magic. In other words, the Obstacles Charm actually slowed down the opponent's time, indirectly slowing them down. If the target was a small creature like a bee or a sprite, it could also freeze them in mid-air, just like the Freezing Charm. According to Dumbledore's description, if the Obstacles Charm was mastered to its highest level, it could even rewind the enemy's time, turning back their actions by several seconds. It was a spell with enormous potential. However, He certainly didn't have that level of skill right now. He could only slow down his opponent. Disappear. After slowing Laxus down, George waved his wand again, using the illusion charm to become invisible on the spot. He didn't intend to engage Laxus in close combat. He fought Fright in close combat because he was confident he could finish him off in a few moves, with virtually no risk. But he wasn't so confident in close combat with Laxus. Given the risk, he could easily choose to be an elegant ranged mage. After all, he didn't have to use lightning magic, and he had plenty of ranged spells at his disposal. Recently, thanks to Dumbledore's guidance, his magical abilities in the Harry Potter world had greatly improved, making it a good time to test his skills against Laxus. Furthermore, compared to the magic society of mages in this world, his magical power was limitless. As long as Laxus's overall strength wasn't significantly greater than his, he could wear him down simply by kiting him with ranged spells. And Laxus's overall strength was clearly much weaker than his. Therefore, in this battle, he would show Laxus what the difference in strength meant, that he would be defeated without even a chance for close combat. He can even use invisibility magic. Realizing that his speed had been greatly reduced and George had disappeared ahead, Laxus's expression changed immediately. He stopped and assumed a defensive stance, beginning to search for George's whereabouts. Chapter 288 The God of Fire opens the way. Thunderous explosion, George flew directly above Laxus and unleashed an explosive spell downwards. Laxus, seeing a red beam of light approaching from above, dared not take it head-on and dodged to the side, simultaneously unleashing his ultimate attack, Thunderous Rage. Thunderclouds instantly formed above the island, and countless bolts of lightning struck downwards. His goal wasn't to defeat George with his lightning bolts, as he knew they couldn't truly harm George, who could also control lightning. His aim was to force George to reveal himself. Sure enough, under the interference of the lightning, George's illusion spell was broken, and his cat form appeared in midair. Now, with a powerful push of his feet, he was about to transform into lightning again and fly into the air to strike George down. However, at this moment, the red magical beam he had dodged struck the ground and produced a violent explosion. The powerful blast interrupted his movements, sending him flying. Fortunately, he was enveloped in lightning and protected by dragon scales imbued with dragon power, otherwise, he would have been severely injured. Firestorm. With a wave of his wand, a massive blue firestorm dragon materialized in the air, roaring towards Laxus below. He was now highly proficient with the firestorm spell, able to condense firestorm into dragon form and imbue it with a certain combat intelligence. Caught off guard, Laxus was bitten by the firestorm dragon, immediately feeling a chilling flame power begin to corrode his body. He didn't understand why the scorching flames gave him such a cold feeling. Fortunately, he wasn't an ordinary mage, but a dragon slayer mage who had awakened the power of dragons, possessing extraordinary defense. Raging Volt, a burst of violent lightning erupted from his body, forcefully repelling the firestorm dragon. Then, with a slash of his mouth, a golden magic circle formed. Roar of the Thunder Dragon, a roar at least 10 times stronger than before pierced through the firestorm dragon, blasting it to pieces on the spot. Don't underestimate me. Enraged by being constantly suppressed, Laxus's dragon form deepened further, and his size swelled by a third. Lightning bolts, countless lightning orbs formed in front of Laxus, rapidly shooting towards George. Facing the lightning orbs below, George was crackling with electricity, waving his hands left and right, scattering the orbs behind him. You should know, this kind of attack is useless against me. The lightning orbs dissipated, and Laxus reappeared, this time wielding a halberd formed from lightning. Then try this move. Laxus forcefully swung the almost solid lightning halberd, sending it hurtling towards George. Lightning Dragon Halberd, this move is interesting. Seeing the lightning halberd hurtling towards him, George's face showed interest, because this time, he found that even using his superpowers, he couldn't deflect the lightning-formed halberd. It could only be said that the lightning energy on the halberd was too strong, exceeding his control limits. Unless he advanced to level 5 Esper, perhaps he could influence it. Armor protection, a magical defensive shield appeared in front of him, blocking the lightning-formed halberd. However, at that moment, another roar rang out. Thunder Dragon's jaw, but this time the voice didn't come from below, but from above George. It turned out that Laxus's dense array of lightning orbs wasn't for attack, but merely to temporarily obscure George's vision. In that instant, he used half of his mana to create a mental form that remained in place to unleash the Thunder Dragon Halberd, while his true form materialized and circled above George, clasping his hands together as he slammed it down. When George turned to look at Laxus above, Laxus below also leaped up and attacked George. Thunder Dragon's crushing fist, looks like a pincer attack. George's lips curled into a slight smile. Because he had actually already spotted Laxus's true form. As a psychic, how could he not know when a hostile person appeared in the sky? He simply hadn't dodged or defended beforehand, but instead chose to play along. Then let's eliminate your thought form first. George activated his psychic power, and an iron spear suddenly burst from the ground just as the thought form leaped up to attack George from behind, piercing through Laxus's thought form and causing it to vanish into thin air. At the start of the battle, he had used his psychic power to conjure hundreds of iron spears below the arena, ready to burst from the ground and launch surprise attacks at any time. Now was a perfect opportunity. Eliminating Laxus's thought form was equivalent to directly depriving Laxus of half of his magic power. Coupled with the powerful attacks he had just used, Laxus didn't have much magic power left. I've fallen for your trap. At this moment, Laxus realized he had been outmaneuvered, but with the thought form already destroyed and having finally gotten close, he couldn't give up. So, he unleashed all the lightning power within him and continued to hammer at George. As long as he could hide it, the thought form that had lost half of its magic power would be worth it. Unfortunately, he miscalculated again. Just as his hands were about to strike George, George vanished in a flash. Upon discovering Laxus above him about to launch a sneak attack, George, besides using his superpowers to control the iron spear below the ring, simultaneously used apparition. He had just completed apparition, so he instantly disappeared. However, he didn't teleport anywhere else, but rather above Laxus. Let me show you Dumbledore's trump card. With a wave of his wand, Fire Gout's path, a massive burst of flames erupted, turning the entire sky above Magnolia City red. Fire Gout's path is one of the most powerful fire spells in the Harry Potter world. George, possessing dragon blood, has a special affinity for fire magic, and his wand, with its core made of Rena's hair, also has a special affinity for fire magic. This makes the Fire God's path he unleashes even more powerful than Dumbledore's spell by more than 10 times. With a flick of his wand, the raging flames instantly contracted, transforming into a raging fire tornado that slammed into Laxus's back. Laxus was slammed into the ground from mid-air by the flames. Fire Gout's path, Dragon Slayer mages have extremely high magic resistance. To prevent any accidents, after casting the first Fire God's path, before Laxus could recover, George immediately unleashed the second, third, fourth, and fifth. He only stopped when he sensed that Laxus was truly on the verge of collapse. His magic power was limitless, so although Fire God's path consumed a lot of magic, casting a dozen or so in a row was no problem. After a few seconds of rest, he could continue casting until his body could no longer withstand it. Chapter 289 The Secret Only the President Knows. Laxus. Laxus, the Thunder God Clan, seeing Laxus lying motionless on the ground, his body covered in burns and unconscious, immediately rushed over, shouting anxiously. Makarov and the other fairy tale mages also ran forward with worried expressions. Laxus was, after all, their grandson. Even though Makarov was angry at his childish antics, he still deeply loved him. The other fairy tale mages also considered Laxus and the Thunder God Clan as comrades. A scolding was nothing, they themselves fought every day in the guild, but they never intended for him to die. Don't worry, I'll heal him. George landed from the air, causing everyone to breathe a sigh of relief. They knew George possessed lost healing magic, so Laxus shouldn't be so badly injured as to die. George placed his cat paw on Laxus's brow, preparing to cast a healing spell, but suddenly noticed something, his eyes darting around, deliberately feigning surprise. Oh no, I think I used too much force just now. His internal organs are burned, I'm afraid. What? Hearing George's words, everyone's expression changed drastically. Makarov's eyes reddened, and he hugged Laxus's head, tears streaming down his face. Laxus, hold on, Grandpa won't let you die. Grandpa will take you to Grandma Poryusika, she can definitely save you. It's all Grandpa's fault, Grandpa shouldn't have kept it from you, I should have told you the truth about your father sooner, it's all Grandpa's fault. The eyes of all the fairy tale mages also instantly turned red. At this moment, George's wand suddenly lit up with blue light, and Laxus's burns healed at a visible speed. I was just kidding, His injuries aren't that serious. It turned out that when he placed his cat paw on Laxus's forehead, he found that Laxus's mind was clear. The reason he didn't open his eyes was probably because he had been defeated by George, and his long-held beliefs had collapsed, leaving him unable to face the situation. So he staged this scene to let Laxus see the feelings that Makarov and everyone else had for him. "Grandpa, I was wrong." At this moment, Laxus opened his eyes red and filled with tears. "You brat." Makarov looked at the awakened Laxus, his tears flowing uncontrollably. Mira Jane flew into the air again, holding a magic microphone and announcing, "The champion of this tournament, the next guild master of Fairy Tale, is none other than George the Cat." The residents of the coastal town erupted in the loudest cheers. The match had been incredibly exciting, especially the overwhelming fire magic at the end, which truly made them realize the power of fairy tale mages. Many local children and those brought by their parents from out of town to watch the performance planted a dream at this moment, to become a mage and join a powerful mage guild like Fairy Tale. Repaired to its original state, George waved his hand, and the island, which had begun to crumble during the battle, returned to normal. With the champion crowned, the competition for runner-up and third place began. However, to George's surprise, according to the rules, the runner-up mage was Lucy. Because Urza was severely injured and unconscious after exhausting her magic in her battle with Laxus, she was unable to continue competing for second and third place, allowing Lucy to advance directly to the top three. Laxus, after his battle with George, also lacked the strength to continue fighting Lucy. Nor did he want to fight his comrades anymore. Lucy advanced to second place without a fight. Therefore, the champion of this tournament was George, the runner-up was Lucy, and the third place was Laxus. Could this guy be the real protagonist of this world? Back at the guild, watching Lucy bouncing around after receiving the top prize of 200,000, George couldn't help but stroke his beard. He knew that every world had a protagonist, and protagonists usually had great luck. He had previously thought it might be one of Natsu, Gray, Urza, or Laxus, but now he felt Lucy was more likely. "I have two announcements to make," Makarov said, descending the stairs after his conversation with Laxus. He addressed the crowd in the hall. "First, George is preparing to take on the 100-year quest. Upon his return, he will assume the position of guild master, and I can retire." The 100-year quest? Is it the same 100-year quest that Gildarts took on 3 years ago? The one no one has ever completed? Hearing that George had taken on the 100-year quest, the mages began to murmur amongst themselves. However, they weren't too worried about George, given his overwhelming victory over Laxus in the recent match, without even using the giant magic that defeated Freed. While no one had ever completed the 100-year quest, they had faith in George. Second, because Laxus intended to use the Temple of the Roaring Gods to attack the town and his guildmates, I, in my capacity as guild master, have expelled him from the guild, Makarov continued, his eyes filled with melancholy. Laxus, standing beside him, lowered his head, clearly accepting the decision. "What? Guild master, isn't that unnecessary? Laxus was just joking with us. Expelling the guild is too serious." Everyone pleaded for Laxus, but Makarov had clearly already made up his mind. At this moment, George spoke up. "Well then, since the guild master has made a decision, we will abide by it. But it's alright, when we return from the 100-year mission, I will be the guild master. And my first decision as guild master will be to reapprove Laxus's membership in the guild." Laxus definitely possessed the power of the 10 wizard saints. A mage of that level wouldn't allow the guild master to truly expel the guild. "At that time, you will be the guild master, so naturally you will have the final say." Makarov looked at George, his tone a mixture of helplessness and gratitude. He naturally didn't want to expel Laxus either, but it was a decision he had to make as guild master, and George had cleverly found a solution that satisfied both sides. Laxus suddenly looked up at George and murmured, "Thank you." Seeing this, everyone returned to a cheerful atmosphere. "You all get ready for tonight's magical parade. George, come with me to the basement." Makarov waved his hand, leading George towards the basement. "Since you'll be the future guild master, it's time you learn some secrets only a guild master should know. The 3 great super magics of the fairies are definitely preserved here." George saw Makarov leading him to the sealed door in the basement and immediately understood. Years ago, he felt that what was hidden within this powerful seal must be some of the guild's most powerful magics. Chapter 290 The Fairy's Heart. Release. Standing before the sealed door, Makarov used his top-tier unsealing magic to break the complex and powerful seal on the door. Our fairy tale guild holds an extremely important secret, a secret known only to the guild master, and one that concerns the safety of the entire world. Ivan was expelled from the guild because he tricked me into revealing part of the secret, intending to use it to cooperate with the dark guilds and rule the entire continent. Concerning the safety of the entire world, George's expression froze. It seemed he had guessed wrong. The sealed chamber wasn't fairy tale's 3 great super magics, but something far more important. The 3 great super magics were powerful, but surely they wouldn't affect the safety of the entire world. At the same time, it piqued his intense curiosity. "Come in with me." Makarov led George into the chamber, to a huge crystal, and pointed at it, saying, "This is the greatest secret of our fairy tale guild, the fairy heart, also known as lumen starlight and myth of light." Huh? George stared at the crystal, utterly shocked. Because it wasn't a proper crystal, nor did it contain a heart. Instead, it sealed inside a naked little girl, her fate unknown. But the next second, when his senses penetrated the crystal, his expression changed drastically. Such powerful magic, he sensed an immense magical power within the crystal and the sealed little girl, far surpassing his own current level and that of any mage he had ever seen. Who is she? A fairy, not a fairy. She is the first guild master of our fairy tale guild, Mavis Viviamilio. Makarov explained the situation to George. At the height of fairy tale's power, the first guild master, Mavis, suddenly passed a position to the second guild master and disappeared. Later, the second guild master found the first guild master's body at the guild's entrance, or rather, not quite a body, because although her heart had stopped beating, a vast amount of magical power was still circulating, making her resemble a living dead. So the second guild master placed the first guild master inside a magic crystal and began a 30-year-long study. Various experiments and spells were used in an attempt to revive the first guild master, all of which failed. However, by chance, the fusion of various bizarre spells resulted in the first guild master's body possessing infinite magical power. For example, the magic spirit cannon, which the Magic Council had accumulated over many years to unleash, could be fired at will using the first guild master's body as a magical source. If someone with malicious intent were to obtain the first guild master's body, they could potentially destroy the entire world using this infinitely vast magical power. Therefore, the Fairy Tale Guild bears the heavy responsibility of protecting the first guild master's body and safeguarding the world. It seems there are truly people more powerful than you in this world, George couldn't help but exclaim after hearing Makarov's explanation. He also possessed infinite magical power, but it was on a completely different level from the first guild master's body. If you were to replenish the magic spirit cannon's power, it would probably take him several years of tireless replenishment to fully replenish it for a single release. However, the first guild master's body could be formed in the blink of an eye. That was the difference. From this story, he not only learned the origin of the fairy heart, but also realized that the mages of this world might be even more powerful than he currently knew. The first guild master, so young, could create 3 super spells. His talent was terrifying. Crucially, even such a powerful guild master could be beaten into a vegetative state while out and about, indicating that many even more powerful mages were hidden in this world. The sense of superiority he felt after defeating Laxus vanished instantly. You only need to know the secret. Come here. Makarov led George to a cabinet in the secret room, took out 3 spellbooks, and handed them to George. These are the 3 super spells of Fairy Tale, Fairy Law, Fairy Radiance, and Fairy Ball. I've only learned Fairy Law. Before you leave, I'll try to tell you all the key points. As for the other 2 spells, you'll have to study them yourself. Looking at the 3 thick spellbooks, George suppressed his excitement and nodded seriously. He absolutely had to study it. Such powerful magic deserved a significant investment of time. Frankly, if it weren't for the fact that the Harry Potter world's Animagus had to be completed within 2 months, he would have preferred to learn the 3 super magic spells first, rather than going to the northern continent. Having obtained the 3 super magic spellbooks and learned from Makarov how to open and close the seals of the Chamber of Secrets, George didn't go upstairs again. Instead, he focused on memorizing the spellbooks in the library. He definitely couldn't take the 3 super magic spellbooks with him. He had to memorize them before leaving for the 100-year mission. However, this didn't faze him. He took out the Winchance glasses and concentrated all his clones' brains on them, working together. In less than an hour, he had imprinted the entire contents of the 3 spellbooks in his mind. Truly worthy of being called the 3 super magic spells, the easiest of Fairy Tail's 3 super magic spells to learn was Fairy Law, which could be learned with a foundation in light magic. Its power was immense, but it had a fatal flaw: it consumed life force and lifespan. The stronger and more numerous the enemy, the greater the consumption. He didn't care about lifespan. Having already achieved immortality, he had an infinite lifespan to expend. As for vitality, his body had multiple physical enhancements and was infused with dragon crystals from 2 worlds. As long as it wasn't depleted all at once, he should be able to recover. If he could further fuse with the dragon crystals of this world, he could consume even more. In fact, compared to the power of magic, this wasn't a major drawback, because against enemies of similar strength, the consumption of vitality wasn't significant. The latter 2 super spells were extremely difficult to learn, but they also caught George's eye. Fairy Radiance, its power was no less than Fairy Law, capable of collecting and condensing the light of the sun, moon, and stars into a merciless beam of light that descended from the sky, killing all enemies. This spell didn't have the weakness of consuming lifespan or vitality, but learning it was incredibly difficult. First, one needed an extremely high level of light magic, so high that even Makarov couldn't learn it, which gives you an idea of how high it required. For George to learn it, his light magic level would at least surpass Makarov's. Second, he needed sufficiently powerful magic power, at least at the level of the 10th Saint, which he had already achieved. Finally, one must have an extremely high level of control over magic, otherwise, it's like a child holding a gun. It has considerable power, but it's difficult to hit anyone. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 291: The Terrifying Black Dragon. The 3rd super magic spell, the Fairy Sphere, was the most unexpected spell for George. It was a time spell, freezing time around him to achieve absolute defense. It was no wonder Makarov couldn't learn it. Time magic was one of the most difficult spells to learn, and even if he wanted to, he lacked the foundation. Time magic in this world was lost magic, with no relevant knowledge available. There was simply no reference. However, it wasn't without a chance for him. After all, there was considerable time magic in the Harry Potter world, and he had been researching it, possessing a foundation in the subject. Furthermore, if other worlds appeared later, new knowledge about time magic might emerge. George, the magical parade is about to begin. At 10 o'clock that night, Mira Jane called George as he left the underground library. Before the guild hall, everyone was ready. Makarov, dressed in a comical clown costume, looked at George and smiled. You, as the next guild master, will lead the way. The old guild master, will bring up the rear. We'll circle the entire city of Magnolia once and then it'll be over. Understood? George's body crackled with electricity. Thunder Giant, a thunder giant over 200 meters tall, rose from the ground. George, his body enlarging, stood atop the giant's head and waved his catpaw. Fairy Tale Magical Parade now begins. Let's go. Everyone cheered, and the convoy of vehicles following closely behind George moved towards the main street of Magnolia City. Meanwhile, the town's residents and tourists had been waiting for a long time. When they saw the 200-meter-tall thunder giant and George on top of it, they all shouted excitedly. It was simply breathtaking. Countless fireworks rose into the sky above the city, and the mages in the convoy displayed their unique abilities, contributing their own color to the parade. Kana's dazzling magic cards danced in the air, while Macau's purple flames and Wakaba's smoke rings drew hearts in the sky. Lovey, Lucy, and Abagrin danced joyfully on the platform above the convoy, while Urza, now in a beautiful suit of armor, manipulated her magical weapons as she soared through the air. Gray constructed an ice castle, Juvia manipulated water to draw fairy tale signs behind it, and Natsa breathed fire that exploded in the air. The entire town was enveloped in a dazzling array of magic, a beautiful and dreamlike scene. 2 days later, George bid farewell to everyone in the guild and embarked on his journey to the northern continent to accept the Centennial Quest. Makarov didn't know the specifics of the Centennial Quest, only that it was issued by the oldest mage guild on the northern continent, the Dragon Array, and that the quest was primarily related to dragons. Hurry up, full speed ahead. Spreading his wings and taking off, George flew at full speed towards the northern continent. Normally, Traveling to the northern continent by ship would take about a month, and he didn't have that much time to waste on the ship. He needed to obtain a dragon crystal within 2 months to combine the strengths of the 3 world dragons, so that he could obtain the most suitable dragon body when transforming into an animagus. After flying tirelessly across the sea for 3 days, he finally saw the northern continent. The scenery on different continents is quite different, George remarked after landing on the shore, eating something, and resting briefly. Looking at the winged fish in the sky and the various strange creatures and plants on land, he sighed. I'll find Gilderts first. He didn't immediately go to the dragon array to accept the 100-year quest, but instead used a tracking spell to begin tracking Gilderts' location. He had used a tracking spell on Gilderts at the guild, indirectly confirming that Gilderts was not dead. Normally, once the target is dead, the tracking spell can no longer be used. Therefore, if the tracking spell has no effect, it's likely that the target is either dead, sealed, or possibly detected and blocked by the enemy. If it displays normally, it at least confirms that the target is alive. That's why he truly decided to accept the century-old quest to find clues about the dragon. Otherwise, if even Gilderts, whose strength surpassed Makarov's, died on the quest, he would have to consider whether to risk coming to the northern continent. Why not go directly to the dragon array, but instead find Gilderts first? Naturally, it was because he was cautious. Gilderts hadn't completed the quest in 3 years, indicating its high difficulty, and he knew nothing about the Dragon Array, the oldest mage guild. Rather than accepting the quest blindly, it was better to find Gilderts first to get a general understanding. Anyway, with his speed and a tracking charm, he could definitely find Gilderts within a day. Direction manifestation, Gilderts Clive, with a golden arrow appearing, George spread his wings again and flew away. Flying in the air, looking down at the scenery of the northern continent, there were many towns here, and the level of magical civilization seemed similar to that of the eastern continent, except that the train lines weren't as comprehensive as in the eastern continent, with only a few lines existing. 5 hours later, in a desolate mountain range, George, who was flying along the golden arrow, suddenly slammed to a halt, staring in shock ahead and exclaiming, "A dragon!" Indeed, he saw a massive black dragon circling in the sky ahead. The dragon's aura was terrifying, so terrifying that even with his current strength, his body trembled slightly. His intuition told him that if he fought that dragon, he would most likely be brutally killed. Are all the dragons in this world this strong? He had considered the possibility of living dragons in the northern continent. Although dragons were legendary, both Natsu and Gagiel were raised by dragons and taught dragon slayer magic. However, he hadn't expected the dragons in this world to be this powerful. In terms of overall strength, he was definitely at the level of the Wizarding 10, and a top-tier Wizarding 10 mage at that. According to Makarov's assessment, his strength should have reached the level of the 4 heavenly kings of the eastern continent. But facing the dragon ahead, he felt he had no chance of winning whatsoever. Even the dragons and Soren of Middle-earth had never given him such a sense of crisis. Looks like killing a dragon to forge dragon crystals won't be so easy. George immediately concealed all his aura and used an illusion charm to become invisible, preparing to operate at any moment. Dispel evil and reveal justice. One day, just then, he suddenly heard a roar and saw a middle-aged man with orange hair leap into the air from a small hill, throwing a punch at the black dragon. Such powerful magic. This guy is Gildas. Chapter 292 5 Divine Dragons. According to Makarov's description, George knew that Gilderts used a super-level magic called Crush. It could instantly shatter the atomic bonds of any matter it touched, and if used on a living being, the effect, depending on the caster's intent, could turn the target into dust or create hundreds of smaller clones. Its power was immense. Because his crushing magic would unintentionally damage surrounding buildings, and he himself was rather careless, he often accidentally caused damage to houses in Magnolia City. Therefore, the town would switch to Gilderts mode every time he returned. The man fighting the black dragon on the hill ahead matched Makarov's description in age, appearance, magic power, and spells, and the tracking spell's arrow was pointing in the correct direction. So, it was naturally Gilderts he was looking for. However, what happened next shocked him so much that his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He had been the one to leave everyone speechless during the fairy tale tournament. Now, he was the one whose jaw dropped at that black dragon. Even Gilderts's powerful punch, which he himself had sensed, hadn't caused any damage to the black dragon. Instead, the black dragon's claw shattered Gilderts's left arm and leg. Human, Since you have some strength and keep me from being too bored, I'll spare your life this time." The black dragon roared at the heavily wounded Gilderts, then turned and flew away without pursuing him. He had come here to find the escaped dragons, but they were too good at hiding, and he hadn't found them. However, he had managed to toy with a human of decent strength, which had cheered him up a little. Now he planned to return to his lair in the sea to sleep for a while, and then come back to continue searching for the hidden dragons. He was determined to kill every dragon in the world. If all dragons in this world are this strong, how could they have been wiped out and even killed to be made into dragon crystals? There must be some secret I don't know about. Seeing the black dragon leave, George accelerated to Gildert's side, picked up the severed arm and leg, quickly put them back in their original positions, and then cast a healing spell. Healed to original, the healing magic in the Harry Potter world is quite powerful. Although it can't regenerate severed limbs, reattaching severed limbs isn't too difficult. Actually, limb regeneration isn't entirely impossible. As long as the severed limbs weren't caused by dark magic, like muties, they could grow back with the help of high-level potions. Healing magic, Happy, when did you learn this lost magic? And isn't your fur blue? Gilderts, his severed limbs reattached, looked at George, who had the fairy tale emblem tattooed on his back, with surprise in his eyes. George withdrew his magic and replied, "You must be Gilderts. I'm not Happy, my name is George. I joined the Fairy Tale Guild a year ago. Let me try moving my arms and legs to see if there are any problems." "Completely fine, it feels like I wasn't injured at all." "Thank you, George." Gilderts carefully examined George and noticed that although George and Happy looked very similar, there were still some differences in appearance, especially in their eyes and demeanor. "By the way, how did you come to the Northern Continent? Did something happen to the guild, and did the guild master send you to find me?" "No. I came to the Northern Continent to take on the 100-year quest, just like you." George shook his head. "What's going on here? Was that black dragon the target of the 100-year quest?" "You? The 100-year quest?" The guild master approved it. Hearing George's words, Gilderts was stunned. Due to his innate Happy aura, in Gildert's eyes, George and Happy's strength should be about the same, except that George could use lost healing magic. And given the danger level of the 100-year quest, only those below S rank were qualified to participate. That's why he was somewhat skeptical. He was somewhat suspicious that George might have taken on the mission without the guild leader's permission. "Don't worry," the guild leader agreed. "And don't underestimate me, I'm quite strong." George pulled out a coin, raised his hand, and fired a railgun at a nearby hill, blasting a large hole in it. Only then did Gilderts believe that George had truly received the guild leader's approval to accept the century-long mission. He scratched his head awkwardly. The century-long mission is indeed related to dragons, but that black dragon wasn't my target. I encountered it by chance today. My target is the other 5 dragons. They're known as the 5 divine dragons. They came to the Northern Continent hundreds of years ago and have been causing chaos ever since. Finding, sealing, or killing them is the core of the century-long mission. However, I've been searching this continent for 3 years without finding any trace of them. But if those 5 dragons are as strong as this black dragon, I think we should abandon the mission and return to the guild. When guild leader Elefsiri of the Magic Gray Dragon issued the century-long mission, she only explained the mission content but didn't provide any clues about the location of the 5 dragons. For the past few years, the 5 dragons have inexplicably gone into hiding. For the past 3 years, he has traveled to various cities in the Northern Continent, searching for clues about the 5 dragons, but to no avail. Of course, this is also related to his own absent-mindedness. He often gets lost and spends most of his time wandering in circles in forests and mountains. Today, he got lost in these mountains and unintentionally encountered this black dragon, which toyed with him and beat him up. If George hadn't appeared, he would have been severely injured and crippled, relying on magical prosthetics for the rest of his life. Therefore, he was extremely grateful. There must be a difference in strength between dragons. That black dragon is probably a strong one among dragons. George thought of Serena, the leader of the 4 heavenly kings of the Eastern Continent, who possessed 8 dragon crystals. If all dragons were as strong as the black dragon he encountered today, he didn't believe that the heavenly god Serena could kill 8 dragons. Also, Laxus's dragon crystal was bought by Ivan from the Northern Continent, indicating that there were mages in the Northern Continent who could kill dragons. Therefore, he guessed that the dragons in this world were strong, but like human mages, there were differences in strength. I planned to go to the Dragon Array to find the Guild Master and learn more about the dragons before deciding whether to accept the mission. If you decide to abandon the mission, you can return to the guild first. After learning all the information about the 100-year mission from Gilderts, George didn't intend to give up so easily. The stronger the dragons in this world, the greater the potential after fusing with the dragon crystal. Perhaps this wasn't a bad thing. Chapter 293 Fallen Arishiria. Then I'll go with you. Gilderts thought for a moment and then made his decision. Having witnessed a black dragon's power, he had completely lost confidence in the mission to seal the 5 divine dragons and was planning to abandon the century-long quest and return to the guild. But since George wanted to try, he was willing to risk going with him. If George were in danger, he could help look after him. They were guildmates, and he had just saved him. He couldn't just leave like that. Okay, if it's really too difficult, we'll go back to the guild together. George nodded. Although Gilderts was defeated by the Black Dragon in one move, his strength was not weak. At least, he felt he was stronger than Laxus. Even if he went all out, defeating Gilderts wouldn't be easy. With such a helper, if they could find a less powerful dragon, perhaps the two of them working together could actually take it down. As for the 5 divine dragons, he'd find out more about them first. His goal wasn't really to do the century-long quest to seal the 5 divine dragons. His goal was to become a Dragon Slayer mage. If he could buy a dragon crystal like Evan without fighting, he would naturally prefer not to take the risk. He could wait until he was stronger and more confident before slaying the dragon. The main reason was that the black dragon had left such a deep impression on him. After a short rest, the man and cat immediately set off for the Magic Array Dragon Guild. Because George could fly, they didn't linger and arrived at their destination before nightfall. That's the Magic Array Dragon, Gilderts said, pointing to a castle below. The castle looked at least 100 years old, covered in cracks and moss. Above the castle was a giant dragon carved from stone. It's said to be the world's first mage guild, but all the mages inside are gone. Only an old mage named Elefsiri remains, and it was he who issued the century-old quest. With Gilderts' explanation, the two pushed open the door and entered the castle. Welcome to the Dragon of Magic Guild. Hero number 99. I'm the guild master. Aren't you hero number 98 from 3 years ago? I hadn't heard from you in so long, I thought you were dead. Just as they entered the castle hall, an elderly mage in a mage's robe, wielding a dragon-shaped wand, instantly appeared before Gilderts and George. He was about to introduce himself, but stopped upon recognizing Gilderts. Spatial magic. Seeing the old mage teleport before them, George raised an eyebrow. This world also had spatial magic, but it was extremely difficult to learn, and the teleportation distance was very limited, not as far as Apparat. The Ghost Guild's guild master, Joseph, used teleportation magic. He had actually studied it, hoping to extract the advantages of teleportation magic in this world and integrate it into Apparat. The biggest drawback of Apparat was the sound it made, like firecrackers, which was detrimental to combat. If it weren't for my good luck, I would have really died, Gilderts gasped, still shaken by the memory of his battle with the Black Dragon. Elefsiria, however, brightened up. So, you've found a clue to the 5 divine dragons. All the mages who came to complete the century-long quest before had been killed by the 5 divine dragons, leaving him without any leads. This meant that newcomers had to start from scratch, like blind men feeling an elephant. If this mage had survived the 5 divine dragons, at least he had some clues. Even if not now, accumulating clues and information step by step would eventually allow a mage to seal the 5 divine dragons. No, I didn't find the 5 divine dragons. I encountered a black dragon. He was very strong, I was almost powerless against him. If he hadn't not intended to kill me, I would be dead. Didn't you say the 5 divine dragons are the most powerful dragons in the northern continent, and also the greatest scourge? Does that mean the 5 divine dragons are stronger than that black dragon? Gilderts shook his head, voicing his doubts. Hearing Gilderts' words, Elefsiria froze, her face filled with disbelief. I never expected you to encounter him, and survive. Your luck is truly remarkable. You know that black dragon. Gilderts and George, perched on his shoulders, exchanged a glance before pressing Elefsiria for answers. Elefsiria didn't hide anything, recounting the story of the black dragon. His name is Echnologia. Over 400 years ago, he was a human mage. After his homeland was destroyed by dragons, he began training in Dragon Slayer magic to slay them in revenge. He eventually killed almost all the dragons, transforming himself into a terrifying black dragon, known by humans and the surviving dragons as the Dragon King, the Black Feather of the End, and the Source of Evil. The 5 divine dragons and some other dragons fled from the eastern continent to the northern continent to escape the black dragon's pursuit. So powerful, Gildert's and George's eyes widened upon hearing Elefsiria's explanation. He wiped out almost all the dragons in the world. So the disappearance of dragons was related to this guy. Our Dragon Slayer mage is really that strong? You said he was originally human, but he transformed into a dragon after practicing Dragon Slayer magic. George finally couldn't help but ask. Seeing George suddenly speak, Elefsiria was startled. Who are you? She thought George was just Gildert's pet cat. I am the 99th hero you mentioned. George released his restrained magical power, radiating an aura of a wizard king XA cat with such powerful magic. Seeing that George was also a mage planning to take on the century-old quest, Elefsiria, after her initial surprise, continued to explain. So-called Dragon Slayer magic is actually a special high-level enhancement magic created by a mage named Irene Bilsirian. It can imbue humans with dragon power, allowing them to use the power of dragons. And if this power is developed to its extreme, one can completely transform into a dragon. But this is not a good thing for humans, because completely becoming a dragon will cause them to lose their sense of taste and many other human senses, as well as the pleasure of sleep. Even if they use magic to transform into human form, it is only a human external form. Essentially, they are still a dragon. At this point, a bitter look appeared on Elefsiria's face. Just like me, his body rapidly expanded, transforming in the blink of an eye into a giant dragon with a jewel embedded in its forehead. I became a Dragon Slayer mage because I wanted to seal the 5 divine dragons. I taught myself the magic book left behind by Irene Bilsirian and eventually transformed into a dragon. That's why I am the only one left in the guild, because all my companions have died of old age. Chapter 294 The Book of Dragon Slayer Magic. Seeing Elefsiria transform into a giant dragon, Gildert's and George were both startled. But then George's eyes lit up. He had gleaned crucial information from Elefsiria's words. Elefsiria hadn't learned dragon-slaying magic through dragon guidance or by embedding dragon crystals. She had learned it through self-study of the magic book left by Irene Bilsirian. Therefore, if he could also study the magic book left by Irene Bilsirian, he wouldn't need to kill the 5 dragon gods to forge dragon crystals to learn dragon-slaying magic. This was exactly what he wanted. No fighting, no risks, just time to read. Of course, this was contingent on Elefsiria being willing to teach him. So, he needed to use some tricks. Guildmaster Elefsiria, your sacrifice to protect the northern continent and its people is truly immense. Your noble character has deeply moved me. I will definitely help you seal the 5 dragon gods. George immediately showed a look of admiration. Elefsiria, having reverted to her human form, immediately brightened up after being showered with praise by George. Haha, actually, I'm not as noble as you make me out to be. I just can't bear to see humans being harmed by dragons anymore. Becoming a dragon isn't without its advantages, though. At least my energy is still quite high. Unfortunately, it seems the 5 divine dragons, even if not as powerful as the black dragon, are far stronger than ordinary dragons. With their current strength, even if we had clues, we probably couldn't defeat them. George couldn't help but sigh. Gildert's nodded in agreement. He didn't believe he and George could defeat the 5 divine dragons, whose strength was second only to the black dragon. With your current strength, it's indeed not enough, but that's alright. This 100-year mission has no time limit. You can train diligently and seal the 5 divine dragons when you're strong enough. During this time, I will also try my best to gather clues about the 5 divine dragons, Elefsiria said after a moment's thought. The man and cat were indeed quite strong, but they were far from being able to defeat the 5 divine dragons. If they actually encountered them, they would just be throwing their lives away like those mages who accepted missions before. Remember, even at his peak, he could only manage a draw against the Earth God Dragon, one of the 6 divine dragons. Although he eventually sealed the Earth God Dragon, his heart was also sealed by the great labyrinth the Earth God Dragon had created, resulting in a significant loss of power. Perhaps now they shouldn't be sending these mages to their deaths one by one, but rather have them work hard to improve their strength, find clues, and then gather together to deal with the 5 divine dragons one by one. Alright, let's decide on that then. Gildert's thought Elefsiria's suggestion made sense. George agreed, but then casually told Gildert's, You should go back to the guild first. I want to stay and learn Dragon Slayer magic from Elefsyria." He then turned to Elefsyria, saying, "You said Acnologia used Dragon Slayer magic to kill a large number of dragons, which turned him into a black dragon. This means Dragon Slayer magic has a certain restraining effect on dragons. So I want to learn Dragon Slayer magic from you so I can seal the 5 divine dragons in the future. Human magic is greatly weakened by dragon skin, but Dragon Slayer magic is actually magic used by dragons. So it won't be weakened and will be more effective against dragons. But you need to be clear that once you learn Dragon Slayer magic, you will eventually be corrupted by dragon power and become a dragon yourself, losing your sense of taste and sleep. That will be very agonizing." Hearing that George wanted to stay and learn Dragon Slayer magic to seal the 5 divine dragons, Elefsyria hesitated for a moment, but didn't refuse. However, he gave her another reminder. Seeing Elefsyria's response, George knew things were basically settled, so he replied solemnly, "Guildmaster Elefsyria, I do have my own selfish motives. If those 5 divine dragons and a black dragon are allowed to continue unchecked, they will eventually destroy the northern continent, and they might even return to the eastern continent. My important companions are there, and I want to protect them, which requires the power of Dragon Slayer magic. Learning Dragon Slayer magic to protect your companions isn't selfish. I did the same thing back then. Since you've decided, I'm willing to guide you. But I must tell you beforehand, Dragon Slayer magic isn't easy to learn. None of my companions mastered it, they all died of old age. Learning Dragon Slayer magic through spellbooks is extremely difficult, requiring a magical prodigy. After founding the Dragon Array Guild, he also taught Dragon Slayer magic to the guild's mages, hoping to use a large number of Dragon Slayer mages to overwhelm the 5 divine dragons and seal them away one by one. Unfortunately, not a single mage mastered Dragon Slayer magic. So even if George is determined to become a Dragon Slayer mage, it won't be easy. "I'm very good at learning magic," George said firmly. With his vast magical knowledge and the ability to learn from so many minds, he didn't believe he couldn't learn dragon slaying magic. If he couldn't, he could always find a way to kill dragons and get dragon crystals later. As for the issue of dragon transformation that Arashiri mentioned, he wasn't worried about it. Dragon transformation requires developing dragon power to its limit and completely transforming the body with dragon power. In reality, because his body shares bloodlines with his various clones, it was uncertain whether dragon power could cover the other bloodlines and allow him to completely transform into a dragon. Even if that were the case, it would take several years, or even more than 10 years, by which time he might have already thought of a solution. For example, modifying Animagus, which could transform from a completely dragonized form into a human. This was different from Arashiria's transformation into a human form. Arashiria transformed into a human form, but her essence remained that of a dragon. Her sense of taste and physique were still those of a dragon. She wouldn't regain her sense of taste just by becoming human. But the transformation of Animagus was complete. If one could transform from a dragon into a human, then one would become a true human. Alternatively, he could prevent dragonification caused by dragon power by integrating bloodlines of the same level. He could use Animagus to achieve dragonification without side effects, without needing to completely modify his body with dragon power. By learning Dragon Slayer magic, incorporating the dragon power of this world within him, and then combining the characteristics of the demon dragon, the fire dragon from the Harry Potter world, and others, he could transform as an Animagus. Because he fused the characteristics of dragons from 3 worlds, the dragon transformed from an Animagus might be even more perfect than the dragons transformed from this world. It wouldn't have the weaknesses of dragons from this world, such as motion sickness. Chapter 295 The Choice of Dragon Power. A month later, at the Dragon Guild of Magic Circles, Elefsyria looked at George and exclaimed in admiration, "You are truly a genius at learning magic. Even I took 3 years to learn Dragon Slayer magic back then, but you only took a month. It seems your race is extraordinary." George was a magical cat she had never seen before, not human, and probably possessed extraordinary magical talent to learn the theoretical knowledge of Dragon Slayer magic so quickly. Probably, George nodded non-committally. His ability to learn the theoretical knowledge of Dragon Slayer magic in a month had absolutely nothing to do with his body's magical talent. Just look at Harpy, the magical cat race probably doesn't have any special magical talent, only excelling in flight magic. The main reason he learned so quickly was that he had concentrated all the minds of all his clones on learning the theory of Dragon Slayer magic for a month. Next, I'll take you to the Earth Dragon's Great Labyrinth to absorb its dragon power as a catalyst. Then you can use its power to become an Earth Dragon Slayer mage, and even enhance your magic by eating Earth. Eleftheria, leading George, activated teleportation magic, appearing several times at the entrance of a vast underground labyrinth. Whether it's self-taught, personally taught by a dragon, or using dragon crystals, the essence is the dragon power as a catalyst to become a Dragon Slayer mage. Personal instruction from a dragon means the dragon actively injects its power into the user. Using dragon crystals means absorbing the dragon power within. Self-taught involves using Dragon Slayer magic to absorb a small portion of a dragon's power. Therefore, the prerequisite is the presence of a dragon. One cannot obtain dragon power out of thin air. He became a Dragon Slayer mage of the magic dragon because he secretly absorbed some of its power years ago, and his information about the Black Dragon and the 5 divine dragons also came from that magic dragon. The reason Eleftheria agreed to let George stay at the castle to learn some Dragon Slayer magic was because he had sealed away the Earth God Dragon. If George could truly learn the theoretical knowledge, he could absorb the Earth God Dragon's power. You can just absorb the dragon power at the entrance. After dropping George off, Eleftheria teleported back to the Dragon Guild. However, George did not immediately sit down to absorb the Earth God Dragon's power, completing the final step to becoming a Dragon Slayer mage, as Eleftheria had instructed. Through this month of spending time with Eleftheria, he had gained a more detailed understanding of dragons and Dragon Slayer magic. In fact, among the dragons that originally fled from the eastern continent to the northern continent, 6 dragons were the most powerful: the Gold God Dragon, the Wood God Dragon, the Water God Dragon, the Fire God Dragon, the Earth God Dragon, and the Moon God Dragon. The Earth God Dragon was the weakest of the 6, so it wasn't his primary target. Crucially, Earth magic didn't offer him any special advantages. Swallowing a mouthful of earth during battle to enhance his Dragon Slayer magic felt rather cheap. His first choice was actually the dragon power of the Fire Dragon and the Wood Dragon, which meant converting into a Fire Dragon Slayer mage or a Wood Dragon Slayer mage. The dragon crystals he fused with in Middle-earth and the Harry Potter world were both fire attribute. If this world also developed towards fire-based dragon slayers, then the power of his Fire Dragon Slayer magic would undoubtedly be significantly enhanced. If he chose water, the different attributes would likely cause the fusion to fail. As for metal, the synergy was uncertain, and the Gold Dragon was too mysterious. Even Eleftheria didn't know its name, so even with a tracking spell, he couldn't find it. He knew the Moon Dragon's name, but didn't know its attribute, and he'd tried tracking it with a tracking spell but couldn't. It was either dead, sealed away, had anti-tracking properties, or simply wasn't in the same space. Many possibilities led him to abandon that idea. If he chose wood, according to his understanding, wood could generate fire, which would also greatly enhance his fire magic. He should be able to fuse with the fire dragons of the other 2 worlds, unleashing not only powerful fire dragon slaying magic but also wood dragon slaying magic. Furthermore, wood symbolizes life, so becoming a wood dragon slaying mage should significantly boost his vitality. With a greatly increased vitality, he wouldn't need to worry about the backlash from using fairy laws. If he overused them, he could simply eat some ancient trees and recover quickly. Meanwhile, he's currently learning life magic from the elves in Middle-earth, and having the physique of a wood dragon slaying mage should accelerate his learning. Of course, whether it will work as he expects remains to be seen. The real challenge now is that even if he doesn't kill the 5 sealed dragon gods, but simply sneaks near them to absorb some dragon power, it probably won't be easy. Therefore, his plan is to try it out first. If it works, great. If not, he still has the sealed Earth Dragon as a backup. At worst, he can come back and honestly absorb the Earth Dragon's dragon power. Eating Earth won't hurt. When he becomes stronger in the future, he might try to mix and absorb various dragon powers, perhaps even evolving into an attribute similar to the Black Dragon, capable of devouring all magic and converting it into magical energy to enhance himself. According to Eleftheria, the Black Dragon's strength lies in its ability to ignore all magic. He finally understood why Gildert's powerful shattering magic hadn't caused any damage to the Black Dragon. The shattering magic was absorbed upon contact with a Black Dragon. What struck was merely a physical attack. To defeat a Black Dragon, only physical attacks would suffice. Furthermore, he learned more precise information about dragon crystals. While embedding a dragon crystal does allow one to become a Dragon Slayer mage directly without learning advanced Dragon Slayer magic, it also suppresses the dragon seed. Even with a dragon power developed to its limit, one won't transform into a dragon. In other words, theoretically, only he, Natsu, and Gagiel might transform into powerful dragons in the future. Laxus would at most remain a humanoid dragon. Therefore, if he doesn't intend to become a dragon through dragon transformation, but only uses an Imagus transformation, he can prevent dragon transformation by embedding a dragon crystal in his body before fully transforming into a dragon. However, Dragon Slayer mages like Laxus cannot use Dragon Slayer magic if they remove the dragon crystal. He, Natsu, and Gagiel, on the other hand, do not have this disadvantage. Direction manifestation, agony. Using a tracking charm to track the trail of the Vulcan dragon, George flapped his wings and flew off along the golden arrow. Chapter 296 George vs. Flame Dragon. Ignia, the fire god dragon, was his first target. The first time he heard the name, he thought of Natsu's adoptive father, Igniel. Both were fire attribute dragons, and their names were so similar, it was hard not to make the connection. He had previously used a tracking spell on Igniel for Natsu, but it hadn't worked. He guessed that Ignia and Igniel might be related. If so, perhaps absorbing some dragon power from the fire god dragon would be much easier. A day later, George arrived at the northernmost part of the northern continent, an area covered by volcanoes. There's actually a city here. Following the tracking spell, he discovered a towering city within the volcanic field. Although the city wasn't large, it didn't seem very populated. It seems the fire god dragon is hiding here. Folding his wings, George quietly landed. But as soon as he landed, a figure appeared behind him. "Who are you, and why have you come to my fire god city?" George quickly turned around, and a young man with a sun tattoo on his chest, radiating terrifying magical power, appeared before him. This guy is Flame God Dragon. He couldn't think of anyone else besides Flame God Dragon who possessed such terrifying fire magic power. According to Levsyria, powerful dragons could also transform into human form, though their strength wouldn't be as great as in their dragon form. Even so, George's intuition told him he couldn't defeat this person. "Excuse me, are you Mr. Ignia?" George asked politely. The young man's face immediately lit up with interest. "I didn't expect you to know my name. Looks like you've come specifically to find me. Are you another mage who took a quest from the Dragon Lord and is here to die?" "Ahem, I wanted to ask, do you know Ignia?" George quickly changed the subject. If he said he had taken on a century-long quest, wouldn't a fight break out immediately? "You actually know Ignia, know my father? Who are you?" Hearing George's words, Ignia's expression changed drastically. He knew Falong well because it was he who deliberately caused the Earth Dragon to lose to Falong, and built a great underground labyrinth to suppress the power of the 5 dragon gods, thus planning to reopen the Dragon King Festival and dragonify all the humans in the entire northern continent. He knew very well that Falong knew very little about the 5 dragon gods, let alone their relationship. Holy crap, they're father and son. Then this guy must be Natsu's brother. Looks like this is going to work. On the contrary, George's eyes lit up when he heard that Igniel was Ignia's father. "Actually, your father had an adopted son named Natsu, and I'm his good friend." "HMPH, you mean that human brat from 400 years ago? I didn't expect him to still be alive." Ignia's expression immediately fell. "You don't think you can become my friend just because you're related to Igniel, do you? Don't you know that we dragons are solitary creatures? Even fathers and sons don't have much affection for each other. And I really hate that human brat. If he's still alive, I wouldn't mind burning him to ashes. Or, I should burn you, his friend, to ashes first, huh?" Hearing Igniel's words, George felt a sense of unease and was also somewhat confused. He hadn't expected the father-son relationship among dragons to be so poor, and he didn't understand what Igniel meant by saying Natsu was a child from 400 years ago. Was Natsu already over 400 years old? At this moment, he suddenly remembered that Natsu couldn't pass through the spell barrier on the day of the Guild War. Perhaps, it really was possible. But now wasn't the time to think about that, because Igniel had already raised her hand and unleashed a flame towards him. Since that's the case, then let's give it a try. In this situation, apparition would naturally be the best option. But after thinking about it, since he was already here, he might as well test the waters a little and see what the 5 divine dragons' strength was like, so he would have a better understanding of their capabilities. Armor protection. George drew his wand and raised it, casting an armor charm in front of him. It actually melted, however. The magical shield formed by the armor charm only lasted for less than 3 seconds before being melted by Agonia's flames. This was the first time he had encountered such a situation. The armor charm's defense was incredibly high in the Harry Potter world. It could defend against all spells except the killing curse. With his current magical power, combined with the super enhancing effect of the wand in this world, its defense was increased more than tenfold. Previously, Laxus's Thunder Dragon Halberd had struck his armor charm without causing the slightest damage. Now, Agonia's most ordinary flames had melted his armor charm. Keep in mind that Agonia was still in human form, much weaker than in dragon form, yet it was already this strong. It was terrifying. Stimulating his body with electric current, George retreated rapidly to dodge the flame attack, pulling with his paw. Plasma cannon. A column of plasma capable of easily slicing through small mountains shot towards Agonia, sending him flying. Your cat is quite interesting. Agonia's body erupted with powerful flames, actually blocking the plasma pillar from his skin. A mere cat could unleash such an attack. Although this attack couldn't harm him, among human mages, he should be considered strong, with great potential. I also have a pet fire cat. If you're willing to be my pet, I might consider sparing your life. Looks like I have no choice but to try this. Seeing Agonia walking towards him through his plasma pillar, George knew that normal magic attacks wouldn't be able to break through Agonia's defenses. So he decided to use the super magic he had recently learned. Super magic, fairy law. With a clasp of his hands, a dazzling white light erupted from George's body, and a huge magic circle appeared above Flame God City. Fairy law wasn't difficult to learn. He had already mastered it during the month or so he had spent learning Dragon Slayer magic. Boom! The huge pillar of light instantly enveloped Agonia. 3 seconds later, the pillar of light dissipated, and Agonia stood there, spitting out a mouthful of dragon blood. Veins bulged on his face, and he was no longer the composed man he had been. You're very good. This is the first time I've been injured in over 100 years. I will burn you to ashes. Terrifying flames erupted from Agonia's body, and his figure flashed as he charged towards George. This consumed 1/3 of my life force, and you only suffered a minor injury? That's truly monstrous. Retreat. George took out a mirror he had prepared beforehand, which had already been enchanted with the mirror magic. He went inside and then apparated away instantly. Chapter 297 George, the Wood Dragon Slayer. Gone. Agonia saw George disappear, grabbed the falling mirror, examined it, and found that the magical traces on it had been erased. He muttered, "So you're proficient in special magic. I'll remember you, little kitty." He had been careless. He hadn't expected a mere kitten to wield such powerful magic, which was why he had only suffered minor injuries. If you were in dragon form, even magic of that level wouldn't have harmed him. However, he had only recently sensed the presence of the black dragon Agnologia in the northern continent, and he dared not revert to his dragon form for fear of being discovered by Agnologia. Although rumors said that the 5 divine dragons possessed power as great as the black dragon, they themselves knew very well that at most they could only say they had the power to escape from the black dragon. Defeating and killing the black dragon was impossible, at least not on their current state. Phew, it seems sealing the 5 divine dragons couldn't wait until later. George teleported to the nearest city in the mirror space, emerged from a mirror, dispelled the mirror magic, and teleported several more times to avoid being tracked by the flame dragon before finally letting out a sigh of relief. The fairy law, activated with 1/3 of his life force, only lightly injured Agonia in her human form. She was clearly not someone he could handle in a short time. Normally, using fairy law against an enemy of similar strength wouldn't consume much life force. But knowing Agonia's strength far surpassed his own, he used an extra 1/3 of his life force to increase the power of fairy law. For his physique, this 1/3 of life force should recover in about 6 months, making it worthwhile to use it to test the strength of the 5 divine dragons. Let's go check out the other 2 dragons. Having roughly understood the flame dragon's strength, he didn't hold much hope for the other 2 dragons and decided to just go through the motions, get a distant understanding, and then return to being a proper Earth Dragon Slayer mage. Following the tracking spell's instructions, he first went to the location of the water dragon. Finding the arrow of the final tracking spell stopped on a vast ocean, he knew the water dragon was likely hiding deep underwater and didn't continue. He wasn't good at fighting in the sea. Turning back, he continued following the tracking spell to the location of the wood dragon, a puzzled look on his face. What's going on? The arrow keeps pointing to this mountain. Could it be hiding inside? Following the arrow, he found a mountain over 8,000 meters high, on which he discovered 5 human-built cities. He initially thought the wood dragon was hiding in these cities. However, the tracking spell's arrow didn't point specifically to the 5 cities, but instead kept pointing to the entire mountain, even after he changed to a more detailed footprint. This left him somewhat confused, assuming the wood dragon was hiding inside the mountain. But when he landed at the summit, intending to probe further, he was stunned. No way, is it that big? The instant he touched the mountain, he felt an extremely terrifying life force and a dense dragon energy. This made him suddenly realize a fact. That means the wood dragon wasn't hiding in this mountain, but rather, this mountain, over 8,000 meters high, was the wood dragon's true form. Over 8,000 meters, that's equivalent to the size of Mount Everest. Is it asleep? George activated his mental abilities and discovered that the wood dragon's consciousness seemed to be in a state similar to slumber. Sleeping is good, sleeping is wonderful. He hadn't expected that his plan to just go through the motions would actually lead to such a windfall. The wood dragon was actually asleep, and the 5 cities below had clearly existed for many years, meaning it wouldn't wake up anytime soon. So, staying here for a while and absorbing some of the wood dragon's dragon power shouldn't be dangerous. The wood dragon's dragon power was one of his preferred sources of dragon power anyway. Perfect. Thinking this, he laid down on the mountaintop, on the wood dragon's head, and began circulating dragon slayer magic, absorbing the wood dragon god's dragon power, gradually improving his physique, and generating a dragon seed. The process of generating a dragon seed takes about a month, unlike dragon crystals which can be directly embedded in the body. However, the entire process was not dangerous. While implanting a dragon crystal was convenient, if the mage receiving the dragon crystal lacks sufficient talent and physical strength, the crystal's power could cause it to explode, which was extremely dangerous. According to Makarov, Laxus's dragon crystal implantation was also incredibly perilous. Thus, as the dragon's power entered his body, slowly improving his physique and generating a dragon seed, George's vitality began to increase dramatically. The 1/3 of his vitality lost from using fairy law was fully replenished within 3 days. A month later, George suddenly opened his eyes, a dragon scale flashing across his cat face. He flew into the air, puffed out his cat mouth, and roared, "Dragon Slayer magic, roar of the wood dragon!" A green whirlwind of magic shot into the sky. Then, he puffed out his cat mouth a second time, "Dragon Slayer magic, roar of the fire dragon!" The second Dragon Slayer magic erupted. Just as I thought, because wood generates fire, the fire dragon's dragon-slaying magic has also been significantly enhanced. At this moment, George had clearly become a legitimate wood dragon-slaying mage in this world. Moreover, thanks to the fire dragon crystals absorbed from the other 2 worlds, he could also simulate Natsu's fire dragon-slaying magic. At the same time, his magic power, physique, and vitality had also greatly increased. This wood dragon isn't a good thing either. Flying into the sky and looking at the sleeping wood dragon below, George couldn't help but sigh. After absorbing dragon power on the wood dragon's head for a month, he also discovered a terrifying fact. That is, this wood dragon wasn't simply pretending to be a sleeping mountain, it was using its dragon power to subtly assimilate all the creatures residing on its body. It was absorbing those creatures as nutrients into its own body to strengthen its power. So, in fact, those 5 cities were bait thrown out by the wood dragon, luring humans to live in the 5 cities, and then continuously devouring humans to evolve. He spread his wings and circled the 5 cities, discovering that all the humans in the cities had been assimilated by the wood dragon. Those who appeared normal were now its puppets. Forget it, I'd better deal with my own affairs first. He was much stronger now than when he fought agony a month ago, but he felt that even if he unleashed all his life force and used fairy law, he probably wouldn't be able to kill the sleeping wood dragon, he would only awaken it. That would only make things more troublesome. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 298: The Vanished Sirius Island. George instantly teleported back to the Dragon Array Guild. He told Arif Syria all the information he knew about the Flame Dragon, Water Dragon, and Wood Dragon. Guildmaster Arif Syria, We are currently no match for these 3 dragons. But don't worry, in a few years, once my strength has increased, I will definitely return to seal the 5 dragons and complete this unfinished century-old mission. George, that's already very good. At least I now know information about 3 of the dragons. That's a huge improvement. Syria wasn't discouraged. Instead, she was overjoyed. In the 100 years since he sealed the Earth Dragon and issued the mission, every mage who accepted the mission had died without exception, bringing back no useful information. George, however, not only found the locations of the 3 dragons but also survived the battle and brought back extremely valuable information, a huge step forward. He was now a dragon. He had plenty of time to wait, not just a few years, but hundreds. Crucially, George had also successfully become a Dragon Slayer mage, and would inevitably transform into a dragon in the future, greatly increasing his strength and granting him the same lifespan as George, thus greatly increasing his chances. After bidding farewell to Elevasilia, George began operation to return to the Fairy Tale Guild in the Eastern Continent. Sealing the 5 divine dragons was not an immediate priority. It would be better to return to the guild to inherit the position of guild master, slowly learning and mastering the other 2 super magics, steadily improving his strength. He had been away from the guild for over 2 months and didn't know what the situation was like there. With Natsu and his group's destructive power during their missions, he wondered how much more money the guild would have to pay in his absence. If he returned any later, he feared the guild would lose all the money it had painstakingly accumulated during this time. Meanwhile, his Harry Potter world clone, having successfully become a Dragon Slayer mage, was preparing to complete the final stages of the Animagus ritual. The journey from the Eastern Continent to the Northern Continent had taken 3 full days, but the return trip from the Northern Continent to the Eastern Continent only required a dozen or so apparitions. Unfortunately, the drawback of apparition is that it can only teleport you to places you've been before. For places you haven't been, you still have to fly. Everyone, I'm back. On December 20th, X784, after more than 2 months, George appeared at the Fairy Tale Guild gates, happily pushing open the doors. He was extremely satisfied with his trip to the Northern Continent. Not only had he successfully achieved his goal of becoming a true Dragon Slayer mage, but he had also learned a lot about the history of dragons, so he was in a very good mood. Where's everyone? Entering the guild, George found that the hall, which should have been bustling at this time, was completely empty. He used his telepathic abilities to sense the surroundings, and found that there wasn't a single person in the entire guild. Something's happened. George's expression instantly turned serious. He knew that normally, even in the face of a major incident, the guild wouldn't be completely deserted. At least 1 or 2 mages would be left to guard the place. Direction manifestation, Makravdriya, he waved his hand, casting a tracking spell on the guild master. No one. The tracking spell failed, and he inwardly cursed. Direction manifestation, Urza Scarlet. Direction manifestation, Mira Jane Strauss. Direction manifestation, Natsa Dragnil. Direction manifestation, Mikhail Kongpo. After failing to use the tracking charm on 7 or 8 members of the guild in a row, he finally succeeded on one. He immediately spread his wings and flew towards Mikhail's location at top speed. This is the direction to Tenrao Island. Flying at breakneck speed, George quickly discovered his flight path, heading straight for Tenrao Island, the sacred ground of the Fairy Tale Guild. Tenrao Island is also known as Fairy Island. It is said that beautiful fairies lived there long ago. It is the birthplace of the first guild master and the location of Wisenadath. Because of the powerful magic cast by the first guild master, mages who are not members of the Fairy Tale Guild cannot normally enter. So many Magic Council warships. Half an hour later, a large number of warships bearing the Magic Council's emblem appeared before his eyes. Because of the Tower of Paradise incident, the original Magic Council had been disbanded. Before he set off for the Northern Continent, he heard that a new Magic Council was being formed, and now it seemed that it had been completed. Using a tracking spell, he quickly found Mikau and some of the Fairy Tale mages on a magical warship. Mikau, what happened? Why is no one at the guild? Where are the guild master and the others? George landed on the warship and asked Mikau. Mikau and the others were immediately excited to see George. George, you're finally back. They said the guild master and Natsu are dead. I don't believe it. Quickly use a tracking spell to find them. The guild master and Natsu are dead? How could that be? George's pupils contracted, and he flew directly to Mikau, placing his paw on his forehead to read Macau's memories. 2 minutes later, he withdrew his paw and quickly flew towards the original location of Tenrao Island. "You guys wait here, I'll go check." It turned out that many things had happened at the Fairy Tale Guild during the 2 months George had been away on the northern continent. 2 weeks after his departure from the guild, Fairy Tale, along with Blue Pegasus, Boa Hancock, and Nico House, joined forces to defeat the Oraciones, one of the 3 major Black Mage guilds. After their success, the Sky Dragon Slayer mage from Nico House, along with her magical cat, joined Fairy Tale. Gildards, who had been on a ship for a month, returned to the guild and reported his situation to the guild master. 3 weeks prior, all the mages of Fairy Tale had been sucked into the Edulus world. The world he was currently in was called Esland. Edulus was another parallel world, and his body, along with Happy and Carla, belonged to the Beyonder race of Edulus. Mystigan, the guild's leader, was also a prince of the Edulus human kingdom and looked exactly like Jill in this world. He came to this world to stop his own world's king from using the super subspace magic anima, which would convert all life in his world into magical energy and absorb it into his own. In the final battle, the Fairy Tale mages thwarted the king's plot. Mystigan remained in his own world and became the new king, while the rest of the guild returned to this world. A little over a week ago, Guildmaster Makarov held the guild's S-class mage exam, and Natsu and the others all signed up. The exam was held on the sacred Tenrao Island. Now, Tenrao Island and all the Fairy Tale mages on it have vanished. Chapter 299 Transformation into Firewood Thunder Dragon. Strength increases drastically. As for what exactly happened on Tenrao Island, Macau wasn't entirely clear. He only heard from the Magic Council that during their exams on Tenrao Island, the guild was attacked by Devil's Heart, one of the 3 major dark guilds, but they successfully repelled it. What truly caused the disappearance of Tenrao Island and the guild members was a terrifying black dragon. The black dragon left after Tenrao Island vanished. After receiving the notification, they and the Magic Council had searched the vicinity for 4 days, but so far, they hadn't found a single guild survivor. "I never imagined the culprit would be the black dragon Echnologia." George flew to the sky above the former Tenrao Island and activated his mental abilities to begin searching bit by bit. In truth, he didn't hold out much hope that Makarov and Natsu are still alive. With Echnologia's strength, Makarov and the others had no chance of winning. Even if the guildmaster used all his life force to activate fairy law, it wouldn't be enough to stop Echnologia. Moreover, he had already used a tracking spell at the guild, but it hadn't worked. But he still wanted to search carefully. Having been in the guild for over a year, he still felt a connection to Makarov and the others. "Huh? This is a fairy sphere." A moment later, George's eyes suddenly lit up. Although he hadn't learned the fairy sphere during this time, his foundation in time magic gave him some basic understanding. During his recent probe, he vaguely sensed traces of a fairy sphere at the location of Tenrao Island. Could it be that time was stopped using a fairy sphere? The fairy sphere is known as time magic with absolute defense, capable of stopping surrounding time to block any attack. Perhaps the guildmaster had mastered the fairy sphere during this period, protecting Tenrao Island and everyone during the Black Dragon attack. This also explained why his tracking spell hadn't worked. Everyone was sealed within the fairy sphere. But several days had passed, and the Black Dragon had long since left. Why hadn't Makarov released the spell? Was there another reason? After all, he hadn't studied the fairy sphere spell in depth yet. Perhaps after studying it properly, he could find the reason and thus a way to unseal it. If his guess was correct, the chances of everyone surviving were still quite high. Returning to the Magic Council's warship, they informed Macau and the others of the general situation, finally giving them some hope. "George, when you left, the guildmaster said you'd be the new guildmaster upon your return. Now that the guildmaster and the others are trapped in time magic, you are a new guildmaster. Alright, I'll take over as guildmaster, but from now on, I'll hand over the guild's affairs to you, Macau. I need to focus all my energy on researching super magic to rescue the old guildmaster and the others." George nodded without hesitation. The S-rank exam on Tenrao Island involved almost all the guild's mages with decent strength. Some were participants, others were there to assist with the exam of the remaining mages in the guild. Macau was the strongest. Macau was also the most senior mage in the guild besides Makarov. Although his strength wasn't particularly outstanding, he knew everyone in the guild very well, so handling the daily operations shouldn't be a problem. After Macau greeted the Magic Council on behalf of Fairy Tale, George led the remaining fairy tale mages back to the guild. George's clone in this world then devoted himself to research on time magic and fairy spheres. Meanwhile, in the Harry Potter world, George, sitting in his classroom, saw lightning flash across the sky and knew his moment had arrived. He used the disappearance charm to become invisible and quietly left the classroom, flying to the place where he had buried potions in the Forbidden Forest. He found the crystal bottle, opened it, and the potion inside had indeed turned red, indicating everything had gone smoothly. He flew with the bottle away from the castle's anti-apparition area, teleported to a deserted area where he had prearranged an invisibility spell, took out his wand, pointed it to his chest, and began chanting, Amato, Onamo, and Amato, Animagus. After completing the incantation, he immediately drank the blood-red potion. The next second, a sharp pain erupted in his heart pounded at an incredible speed, magic enveloped his entire body, and his body began to rapidly expand. It took about half a minute for his body to complete the animagus transformation. Phew, finally done, George observed his new body, his eyes filled with excitement. As expected, I really became a dragon, and a dual-attribute dragon at that. Indeed, it was roughly as he expected. Because of the dragon seed and dragon crystal, his animagus transformation broke through the bottleneck that prevented normal animagus from transforming into magical creatures, turning him into a true dragon. However, this dragon was neither the golden dragon of Middle-earth, nor the fire dragon of the Harry Potter world, nor the wood dragon of fairy tale, but a hybrid entity combining the external features of three dragons. His body was predominantly the green of a wood dragon, yet possessed the wings of a fire dragon from the Harry Potter world, while the wings had the gold characteristic of a dragon. He was 500 meters tall, larger than both the dragon and the fire dragon, but far smaller than the wood dragon. However, the wood dragon was so large mainly because it had devoured countless humans over the past 400 years. It probably wasn't that large when it initially fled from the eastern continent to the northern continent. His attributes are dual attribute, possessing both the wood attribute of the wood dragon and the fire attribute of the demon dragon and fire dragon. Or more accurately, it should be considered three attributes, because in this state, his superpowers remain, and he can still use lightning, though not as dragon-slaying magic. In his dragon form, he feels that both his vitality and magic power have been greatly enhanced, and his physical strength has been boosted to an epic level. If he could have transformed into this form when fighting the demon dragon in Middle-earth, he wouldn't have needed the help of the three elven princes, he wouldn't have needed magic, he could have easily crushed the demon dragon with his terrifying physical body alone. Of course, even now, he feels he is probably no match for the fire dragon. He might be able to try fighting it in human form, but against a fire dragon in its dragon form, he probably has little chance of winning. This is only because his current vitality is strong, which can greatly enhance the power of his super magic, fairy law. As for the black dragon, well, the revolution is not yet complete, comrades still need to work hard. The black dragon devours all magic, so his fairy law is ineffective against it. He can only win through hand-to-hand combat, which is obviously much more difficult to deal with. The key issue is that the black dragon's magic is effective against him, and he lacks magic immunity and magic absorption. Therefore, seeking revenge on the black dragon for the guild members is out of the question for now. Chapter 300 The New York Sanctum. Should I go find the Ancient One? In the Marvel Universe, in the school basement, George stood in a combat simulation training room he had expanded 100 times with the unfathomable stretch charm, a conflicted expression on his face. The fairy sphere was extremely difficult to learn. Based on his current knowledge, even if he devoted all his energy to this magic, it would probably take him 7 or 8 years to master it. To improve efficiency, he needed to acquire new knowledge about time magic. Currently, besides the Harry Potter world, only the Marvel Universe seemed to offer a breakthrough. And that breakthrough, of course, was the Ancient One, the true Sorcerer Supreme and the mentor of Doctor Strange, the master of time management. Marvel magic was mostly borrowed from the power of dimensional demons, and the magic they used originated from them. However, the Ancient One was an exception. While most of her magic also borrowed from dimensional demons, she only borrowed and never returned it. Dimensional demons who came to her door would be beaten up. Behind her were not only the Trinity of Vishanti, but also Eternity, one of the 5 cosmic entities. He believed that the Ancient One's essence was close to that of a dimensional lord, and that her existence after death, along with Eternity, likely made her a dimensional lord as well. Therefore, some of the Ancient One's magic, like her time magic, should require borrowing. Of course, this was just his speculation, but he was certain that the essence of magic across all worlds was the same. If he could consult the Ancient One about the theory of time magic in this world, it would greatly help him learn the fairy orb. His hesitation stemmed from the Ancient One's attitude towards him, as the Sorcerer Supreme, someone who could use his own magic and whose essence was similar to that of a dimensional lord in this world. However, after careful consideration, he realized it shouldn't be a big problem. The Ancient One could see the past and future with the Time Stone and might have already been paying attention to him. The fact that she hadn't actively sought him out suggested she wasn't hostile. The Sorcerer Supreme protected Earth primarily against dimensional lords who wanted to invade it. He wouldn't interfere in matters between normal humans unless the entire Earth was on the verge of destruction. After all, he was human, not one of those dimensional lords. Also, if a conflict did break out, while he might not be a match for the Ancient One, he certainly wouldn't be helpless. The Ancient One's power lies not only in her own strength, but more importantly in the fact that the three sanctums can significantly weaken the power of dimensional lords. Dimensional lords are already weakened by half when they leave their own dimensions, and after arriving on Earth, their power is further diminished by the three sanctums, which is why the Ancient One could easily defeat them. Therefore, before Caecilius summoned Dormammu, he destroyed the three sanctums first. When Wanda attacked Kamar-Taj, the three sanctums were essentially useless. He was a human born on Earth, an experimental subject, but not a dimensional lord, so the three sanctums had no effect on him. Now, he can use his animagus to transform into a dragon, greatly increasing his power, and he still has some ability to protect himself. Then let's go to the New York Sanctum first. Finally, George decided to go see the Ancient One. If it worked out, it would relieve a great deal of his anxiety. Otherwise, not knowing the Ancient One's attitude towards him kept him somewhat apprehensive. He pushed open the door to the training room and went up to the school. It was afternoon, and the students were in class. In the past few months, the school had seen an increase in both the number of students and teachers. After the annihilation of Project Insight in Washington and the public unveiling of the school to the media, superhumans from all over the world began arriving. Among them were children sent by their parents and adult superhumans rejected because of their abilities. After a screening process involving the instructor's psychic abilities, those who passed became students, teachers, and school staff. Those who didn't were expelled. The Superhuman Academy had now become a sanctuary for superhumans from around the world. Here, at least they didn't have to worry about being captured by local governments and various organizations for experiments. Spreading his wings, George was preparing to fly towards the New York Sanctum when a rainbow descended from the sky, and Thor appeared on the lawn in front of the school. "Good afternoon, George. Is everything settled?" George asked with a smile. 2 months ago, Thor finally managed to wield Mjolnir through his own efforts, regaining the divine power sealed by Odin. Now he shuttled between Asgard, the Superhuman Academy, and Jane's residence, sometimes enthusiastically cracking down on criminal gangs. "It's all taken care of. There was a little unrest in Jotunheim because of Laufey's death, but I've gone to calm things down." He changed out of his Thor armor into a suit and transformed Thor's hammer into an umbrella. "Oh, it's already 5 o'clock. I need to hurry. I'm going to see the newly released movie The Cabin in the Woods with Jian Yu today." The Cabin in the Woods. Okay, enjoy the movie. George thought back to the movie and couldn't help but twitch his lips. Vanishing, he became invisible and flew into the air, heading towards the address of the New York Sanctum from the movie. He remembered that the New York Sanctum in the movie was located in Greenwich Village, in the heart of New York City, at 177A Black Street. He wondered if the New York Sanctum in this universe would be different. If it wasn't, it didn't matter. He could go directly to the Kamar-Taj headquarters in Kathmandu, the capital of Nepal. Or he could use a tracking charm, but that seemed a bit impolite. This should be it. Soon, he found a 3-story Victorian-style townhouse made of brownstone, featuring French Baroque architectural design and a duplex roof. At the top of the villa's roof was a circular skylight with 4 curved lines. Although the entire villa was shrouded in powerful magic, George could still sense the hidden magical energy within. Ding dong. Arriving at the villa's door, George pressed the doorbell. A moment later, a black man in a sorcerer's robe opened the door. He wasn't surprised by George's appearance, but smiled and said, "It must be Mr. George. The Sorcerer Supreme is already waiting for you." The Sorcerer Supreme knew I was coming. George's brow furrowed. He knew the Ancient One possessed the Time Stone and was proficient in time magic, able to glimpse different possibilities of the future, but she wasn't omniscient. Just as Doctor Strange could see 14,605 future scenarios involving Thanos, it was because he specifically used time magic for that particular battle. Otherwise, he should have already foreseen Thanos' attack and Scarlet Witch's corruption. Now that the Ancient One knew he was coming and was already waiting, it meant that, as he suspected, she had indeed been watching him for a long time, just without actively contacting him. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.